The wedding dress hung like a ghost in the corner of her room. In 72 hours, Evelyn Hartwell would wear it, smile through vows she didn't mean, and become the wife of a man who saw her as nothing more than a walking bank account. But tonight, standing outside his study with her hand frozen on the doorknob, she'd hear the words that would burn her perfect life to ash. "I don't love her, Clara. How could I? But her father's railway fortune will solve everything." Her cousin's laugh came next, breathy and intimate. Evelyn's heart didn't just break. It detonated. What happened next would scandalize London, destroy her reputation, and force her to choose between the cage she knew and the terrifying freedom she'd never imagined. This is her story. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this journey travels. And if you stay until the end, you'll witness the moment a society girl became something far more dangerous. A woman who refused to be owned. The rain came down in sheets against the windows of the Hartwell townhouse, each droplet racing the others down the glass like desperate runners fleeing something terrible. Evelyn watched them from her bedroom, her fingers pressed against the cold pane, trying to feel something other than the numbness that had settled into her bones over the past 6 months. 23 years old, engaged to the Duke of Ashford, the envy of every unmarried woman in London, and completely, utterly miserable. "Miss Evelyn, you'll catch your death standing there in your nightgown." Martha's voice cut through the drumming rain. The old housekeeper shuffled into the room, arms loaded with fresh linens that smelled of lavender and steam. "The fire's gone low again. These spring storms, they get into everything." Evelyn didn't turn from the window. "Do you ever wonder, Martha, if the rain knows where it's going, or does it just fall because that's what's expected?" Martha paused, her weathered hand stilling on the bedspread. In the reflection of the glass, Evelyn could see the old woman's face crease with something that looked like pity, or perhaps recognition. "I expect the rain does what it must, miss, same as the rest of us." "That's what I'm afraid of." The words came out smaller than Evelyn intended. She pulled her silk robe tighter, though it did nothing against the chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Tomorrow was the final dress fitting. The day after, the last dinner party before the wedding. Then the ceremony itself, St. George's, Hanover Square, with half of London's elite packed into the pews to witness Evelyn Hartwell become the Duchess of Ashford. The triumph of the season, everyone said. A love match, the papers claimed. Lies. All of it. "Your mother's asking for you downstairs," Martha said quietly. "She's in the drawing room with Lady Pemberton, discussing the table settings." "Of course she is." Evelyn finally turned from the window. "Heaven forbid the pheasant be served on the wrong china." "Miss Evelyn, I know, Martha, I know." She crossed to her dressing table, began pinning up her dark hair with mechanical precision. Each hairpin felt like a tiny nail being driven into a coffin. "Tell Mother I'll be down shortly. I need to look presentable." Because that's what mattered in the Hartwell household. Not what you felt, not what you wanted. Only how you appeared. Her father had made his fortune in railways, new money, which meant they were always one step away from being dismissed by the old guard. Evelyn's marriage to the Duke of Ashford would cement their place in society forever. It was the deal her father had worked toward since she was 16, the culmination of every ball, every introduction, every carefully orchestrated moment of her life. And she'd agreed to it, hadn't she? Said yes when Alexander Ashford knelt in the garden at the Hemmings' summer party, the ring glinting in the sunset like a shackle made of gold. She'd said yes because that's what dutiful daughters did. She'd said yes because she'd been taught that love was a luxury women like her couldn't afford. She'd said yes because she'd honestly believed, somewhere in the naive corners of her heart, that Alexander might grow to care for her. Stupid. So catastrophically stupid. Evelyn descended the stairs with her practiced smile firmly in place, the one she'd perfected over years of society dinners and tedious tea parties. Her mother's voice drifted from the drawing room, high and excited. "The roses will be imported from France, of course. Only the best for the Duke's wedding. And Evelyn's dress, oh, you should see it, Constance. Worth every penny, though her father nearly fainted at the cost." Laughter, sharp and bright. "But what's money when you're marrying your daughter to one of the finest titles in England?" Evelyn's hand tightened on the banister. What's money, indeed? She was 3 steps from the drawing room when she heard her cousin Clara's voice from behind her father's study door. The one room in the house that was supposed to be off limits this evening while he worked on business matters. You're terrible, Alexander. Absolutely terrible. But Clara was laughing, that particular laugh she reserved for men she was flirting with. Evelyn froze. Terrible, am I? Alexander's voice, smooth and aristocratic, the same voice that had whispered pleasantries in Evelyn's ear at countless dinners. And yet you're here, in a closed study, alone with me 3 days before I marry your cousin. You're the one who sent me that note. Because I needed to see you. Is that so wrong? The flirtation in their voices made Evelyn's stomach turn, but she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything except stand frozen in the hallway, while the two people who should have been most loyal to her spoke in tones that dripped with intimacy. We shouldn't be doing this, Clara said, but there was no conviction in it. If anyone found out, no one will find out. We've been careful. Have we? Because I rather think this is the opposite of careful, darling. Darling. The word hit Evelyn like a physical blow. After the wedding, things will be easier. Alexander's voice dropped lower. Evelyn had to strain to hear it. Once I have access to her father's fortune, I can settle my debts, repair the estate. Then we can what? Continue sneaking around like thieves? We'll figure it out, Clara, I promise. And what about Evelyn? The silence that followed was somehow worse than any answer could have been. What about her? Alexander finally said. Don't you feel even a little bit guilty? She thinks you care for her. I do care for her. She's pleasant enough, dutiful. She'll make an acceptable duchess. You don't love her. It wasn't a question. Clara said it like a fact, something they both already knew. How could I? Alexander's voice carried a hint of amusement, as if the very idea was absurd. She's a railway heiress with decent manners and a pretty enough face. But love? No, Clara, I don't love her. I love you, and her father's fortune will solve everything. The floor seemed to tilt beneath Evelyn's feet. The walls pressed in. Somewhere very far away, her mother was still talking about roses and china patterns, but Evelyn couldn't hear her anymore over the roaring in her ears. This is madness, Clara whispered. If she ever found out, she won't. Evelyn sees what she wants to see. She's been raised to be obedient, to accept her role. She'll play her part, bear an heir or two, and never question anything. That's what women like her do. Women like her. Obedient, dutiful, blind. Something inside Evelyn cracked. Not broke. Breaking implied pieces that might be put back together. This was different. This was the sound of a foundation crumbling, taking everything built upon it down into the rubble. She didn't remember moving, but suddenly she was in her room again. The door closed behind her, her back pressed against the wood like she could physically hold out the truth she'd just heard. Her cousin. The woman she'd grown up with, shared secrets with, trusted. And her fiancé. The man she'd convinced herself she could build a life with. Both of them. Together. Laughing about how easy she was to deceive. The wedding dress mocked her from its place by the wardrobe. Evelyn looked at it, really looked at it for the first time. White silk and French lace, thousands of seed pearls sewn into intricate patterns. It had taken 3 seamstresses 6 weeks to create. Her mother had cried when Evelyn first tried it on, and it was all for a lie. Evelyn crossed to her writing desk, pulled out a piece of paper with hands that shook so badly she could barely hold the pen. She needed to write to someone, needed to tell someone what she'd heard. But who? Her mother would dismiss it as pre-wedding nerves. Her father would accuse her of trying to sabotage the most important business arrangement of his life. Her friends, if she could even call them that, would spread it across London before sunset tomorrow. She was utterly, completely alone. The pen hovered over the paper. She wanted to write something profound, something that captured the magnitude of what she'd just lost. But in the end, she wrote only 3 words. I won't do it. She stared at them. 3 words that represented an impossibility. Women in her position didn't simply refuse to marry, especially not 3 days before a wedding that had already been planned, paid for, announced in the Times. The scandal would destroy her family. Her father would probably disown her. Society would label her damaged, difficult, unmarriageable. And yet, I won't do it. Evelyn stood, moving with sudden purpose. She pulled her traveling trunk from the wardrobe, began filling it with practical things. Not ball gowns and silk slippers, but her plainest dresses, her warmest cloak, her sturdy boots. Her jewelry box sat on the dresser, full of pieces her mother had given her over the years. She took only the simplest items, her grandmother's pearl earrings, a gold locket that had belonged to her aunt. "Miss Evelyn?" Martha's knock was soft. "Your mother's asking—" The old housekeeper stopped when Evelyn opened the door. Her eyes went to the trunk, the clothes, the look on Evelyn's face. "Lord help us," she breathed. "What are you doing?" "I'm leaving, Martha." "Leaving? Child, the wedding's in 3 days." "There isn't going to be a wedding." Evelyn's voice came out steadier than she felt. "I overheard Alexander and Clara. They're together. Have been for some time, apparently. He's only marrying me for father's money." Martha's face went white, then red, then settled into a hard fury that Evelyn had never seen on the gentlewoman's features. That bastard! I knew there was something wrong about him. Too smooth, too practiced. "You never said anything." "Would you have listened?" Martha's voice softened. "You were so determined to be dutiful, to make your parents proud. I wouldn't have listened," Evelyn admitted. "I would have convinced myself you were wrong. I'd convinced myself of so many things." She turned back to her packing. "I can't stay here, Martha. I can't marry him knowing what I know. And I can't face my parents because they'll tell me to do it anyway." "Where will you go?" The question stopped Evelyn cold. She hadn't thought that far ahead. She had no money of her own. Everything was held in trust by her father until her marriage. She had no friends who would harbor a runaway bride without immediately alerting her family. She had no skills beyond watercolors and passable piano, nothing that would allow her to support herself. She had nothing, except— "There's a man," she said slowly. "Rowan Hale. Do you remember him? He came to dinner last year when father was trying to secure an investment for the Northern Railway line." Martha frowned. "The quiet one? Barely said 2 words the whole evening?" "That's him. He has the estate in Cornwall, coastal property. He's—" Evelyn searched for the right words. "Different. Father said he was a recluse, that he'd turned down every London invitation for the past 5 years. But when he spoke, he listened. Really listened. Like what I said actually mattered." It had been a strange evening. Most men talked over Evelyn or through her, addressing their comments to her father while she sat quietly and looked decorative. But Rowan Hale had asked her opinion on things, real things, not just the weather or the latest fashion. He'd wanted to know what she thought about the railway expansion, about commerce and trade routes. He'd treated her like she had a mind. It had been the first time in years Evelyn had felt like something other than a particularly valuable piece of furniture. "Cornwall's a long way, miss." "I know." "And you haven't spoken to this man in over a year. He might not even remember you." "I know that too." Evelyn closed the trunk, sat on top of it to latch it shut. "But I have nowhere else to go, Martha. And I remember him saying that his door was open to anyone who needed refuge from London's madness. I'm hoping he meant it." Martha was quiet for a long moment. Then she moved to Evelyn's dresser, pulled out a small cloth bag that clinked with the sound of coins. "My savings," she said, pressing it into Evelyn's hands. "It's not much, but it'll get you to Cornwall and keep you fed for a few weeks." "Martha, I can't." "You can and you will. I've been putting it aside for years, hoping for a little cottage by the sea when I'm too old to work. But you need it more than I do right now." The old woman's eyes were bright with tears. "You're doing the right thing, miss. A hard thing, maybe. A scary thing. But the right thing." Evelyn hugged her, this woman who'd been more of a mother to her than her own mother had ever been. "Thank you." "There's a mail coach that leaves from the posting house on Brompton Road at dawn," Martha whispered. "I know the driver. Tell him Martha sent you and he'll see you get where you're going safe." They made the plan quickly, quietly. Evelyn would leave before the house woke, taking only what she could carry. Martha would tell the family she'd gone for an early morning walk and hadn't returned, buying Evelyn a few hours before anyone thought to truly search for her. That night, Evelyn didn't sleep. She sat by her window and watched London's lights flicker in the darkness, tried to memorize the view. Everything she'd known was about to disappear. Her family, her home, her identity as Evelyn Hartwell, society lady. Tomorrow, she would become something else entirely. She just didn't know what yet. At 4:30 in the morning, while the house slept and the rain had finally stopped, Evelyn Hartwell walked out of her family's townhouse for the last time. She wore her plainest dress, her warmest cloak. Her trunk was small enough to manage on her own. In her pocket, Martha's coins and a note she'd written in the darkest hours of the night. Mother and Father, by the time you read this, I will be gone. Please don't look for me. I overheard truths I was never meant to hear, and I cannot, will not, go through with this marriage. I would rather face scandal than live a lie. I'm sorry for the embarrassment this will cause, but I am not sorry for leaving. E. She left it on her pillow, weighted down with the engagement ring she'd worked off her finger. The diamond caught the first light of dawn, throwing rainbow sparks across the ceiling. Pretty, expensive, meaningless. The posting house was already awake when Evelyn arrived, drivers preparing coaches and checking harnesses. She found the mail coach to Cornwall, approached the driver, a weathered man with kind eyes. Martha sent me, she said quietly. He looked her over, taking in the quality of her dress despite its plainness, the way she held herself. Running from something or toward something, miss? Both, I think. He nodded like that made perfect sense. Cornwall's a long way. 2 days if the weather holds, 3 if it doesn't. You sure about this? No, she wasn't sure about anything except that she couldn't go back. I'm sure, she lied. Right then, climb aboard. We leave in 10 minutes. Evelyn hauled her trunk into the coach, settled into a corner seat. 2 other passengers were already there, a middle-aged woman knitting and a young man who looked like a clerk, his spectacles sliding down his nose as he read through a stack of papers. Neither of them recognized her. Neither of them knew she was supposed to become a duchess in 2 days. The coach lurched into motion just as the sun began to rise over London's rooftops. Evelyn pressed her face to the window, watched the familiar streets roll past, the parks where she'd walked as a child, the squares where she'd attended her first balls, the church where she was supposed to marry Alexander, all of it falling away with every turn of the wheels. The woman across from her looked up from her knitting. First time leaving London, dear. Yes? It came out as barely a whisper. Nervous, are you? Don't be. Cornwall's lovely this time of year. Are you visiting family? Something like that. The lie was easier than the truth. How did you explain to a stranger that you were fleeing your own wedding, running to a man you'd met once and barely knew, with nothing but hope and desperation driving you forward? You didn't. You just sat quietly and watched London disappear. By mid-morning, they were in the countryside. Green fields stretched in every direction, dotted with sheep and stone walls. Evelyn had never been this far from home. The world felt impossibly large and terrifyingly empty. You look pale, miss, the clerk said, glancing up from his papers. If you're feeling sick from the ride, I have some peppermint. I'm fine. Thank you. But she wasn't fine. With every mile, the reality of what she'd done began to sink in. Her parents would have found her note by now. Her mother was probably hysterical. Her father was probably raging. And Alexander? What would he do when he learned his profitable marriage had evaporated overnight? Would he care that she'd heard him confess he didn't love her? Or would he only care about losing access to her father's fortune? She knew the answer to that. The coach stopped at a posting inn for lunch. Evelyn couldn't eat, managed only tea that tasted like dishwater. The other passengers chatted about mundane things, the weather, the roads, the price of grain, normal life, continuing on while Evelyn's entire existence crumbled. Are you quite certain you're well? The woman asked when they returned to the coach. You look like you've seen a ghost. Just tired, Evelyn said. I didn't sleep much last night. That, at least, was true. The afternoon stretched on endlessly. The landscape changed gradually, less farming, more wild spaces, hills that rolled like frozen waves, clouds that hung lower, heavier, like they might drop right onto the earth. By evening, they'd reached the first coaching inn where they'd spend the night. The clerk and the knitting woman both had people meeting them, disappeared with relieved greetings. Evelyn was left alone in the inn's common room, nursing another cup of terrible tea and trying not to think about what would happen tomorrow. She'd arrive in Cornwall. She'd find Rowan Hale's estate. She'd knock on his door and throw herself on the mercy of a man who might not even remember her. It was possibly the worst plan in the history of plans. but it was the only one she had. "You're the lady from the London coach?" The innkeeper appeared at her elbow, a short woman with flour in her hair and suspicion in her eyes. "Traveling alone, are you?" "I'm meeting someone in Cornwall." Another lie. They were coming easier now. The woman didn't look convinced. "Well, your room's ready when you are. Upstairs, second door on the left, and we lock the outer doors at 10, so don't be wandering." The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed and a window that looked out over the inn's courtyard. Evelyn sat on the bed and tried not to cry. She was so far from home, so far from everything familiar, and she still had another full day of travel ahead of her. What if Rowan Hale turned her away? What if he wasn't the man she remembered? What if she'd made a terrible, irreversible mistake? But then she thought about Alexander's voice. She's pleasant enough, dutiful. She'll make an acceptable duchess. And her cousin Clara laughing, complicit. No. Whatever waited for her in Cornwall, it had to be better than that. She lay down fully clothed, too exhausted to even undress. Sleep came in fits and starts, punctuated by dreams where she was back in London, standing at the altar in that white dress, unable to speak or move, while Alexander slipped the ring on her finger and sealed her fate. She woke with a gasp, heart pounding, to find morning light creeping through the thin curtains. Day 2. The coach left at dawn. New passengers this time, a family with 2 small children who wouldn't stop squirming, and an older gentleman who fell asleep before they'd gone a mile and snored like a freight train. The landscape grew wilder, more rocks, more hills, less farmland. The sea appeared in the distance, a gray line on the horizon that made Evelyn's heart jump. She'd never seen the ocean. It seemed impossible, this great expanse of water, stretching on forever. "First time seeing the sea?" the mother asked, smiling despite the child on her lap pulling her hair. "Yes. It's something, isn't it? My husband says it gets in your blood. Once you've lived by the sea, you can't go back to inland life." She shifted the child to her other hip. "Are you visiting Cornwall or staying?" "I don't know yet." The honest answer seemed to surprise the woman. But before she could ask anything else, the coach hit a rut and everyone grabbed for handholds, conversation forgotten. They reached the main Cornwall posting station as the sun began to sink toward the western horizon. The other passengers dispersed quickly, met by family or hired carriages. Evelyn stood alone with her trunk, looking around at a world she didn't recognize. "Can I help you, miss?" A young boy approached, cap in hand. "Looking for somewhere particular?" "The Hale Estate," Evelyn said. "Do you know it?" The boy's eyes widened. "Clifftop House? Aye, I know it. But nobody goes there, miss. Mr. Hale doesn't receive visitors." "He'll receive me," she hoped, prayed. "How do I get there?" "It's about 5 miles north along the coast road. But there's no coach that goes that way, not this time of evening." 5 miles. With a trunk and darkness falling. Evelyn looked down at her traveling clothes, her sturdy boots. "Then I'll walk." "Walk? Miss, I don't think—" "I'll give you a shilling to watch my trunk until morning. I'll send someone to collect it." She pressed the coin into his palm before he could argue, kept only a small bag with her most essential items. The boy looked at the shilling, then at Evelyn, then back at the shilling. "You're mad, miss. Begging your pardon, but you are." "Probably." She adjusted her cloak. "Which way is north?" He pointed, still looking baffled. Evelyn thanked him and started walking before she could lose her nerve. The coast road was rougher than she'd expected, more of a track than a proper road. The sea roared somewhere to her left, loud and rhythmic. The wind tasted of salt and carried the cries of gulls. As the sun set, the temperature dropped, and Evelyn pulled her cloak tighter. This was madness, pure madness. But she kept walking. After what felt like hours, but was probably less than one, she saw it. A house perched on the cliff edge, dark stone against the darkening sky. Lights glowed in a few windows, warm and inviting, or possibly forbidding. It was hard to tell from this distance. Clifftop House. It had to be. Evelyn's feet hurt. Her hands were numb. She'd left London less than 2 days ago, and already that life felt like something that had happened to someone else. She walked up to the front door, raised her hand to knock, then hesitated. This was her last chance to turn back, to return to the posting station, send a telegram to her parents, apologize for her momentary madness, and beg forgiveness. The wedding could still happen. Probably. With enough groveling and enough money, scandals could be smoothed over. She could go back to being dutiful Evelyn Hartwell. She could marry Alexander Ashford and spend the rest of her life pretending she didn't know he loved someone else. She could be acceptable. Or she could knock on this door and step into the unknown. Evelyn took a breath that tasted like salt and freedom and terror. Then she knocked. For a long moment, nothing happened. The wind howled around the clifftop, pulling at Evelyn's cloak like it wanted to drag her back down the road she'd just walked. Her knuckles hurt from the cold, from gripping her bag too tightly, from the force of that single knock that now seemed impossibly loud in the darkness. Maybe no one was home. Maybe Rowan Hale had left Cornwall entirely, and the lights she'd seen were just servants maintaining an empty house. Maybe... The door opened. A man stood in the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, holding a lamp that cast harsh shadows across his face. Not Rowan Hale. This man was older, with gray threading through his dark hair and the weathered look of someone who'd spent most of his life outdoors. "We don't take solicitors." His voice was gruff, dismissive. He started to close the door. "Wait, please." Evelyn stepped forward, her boot catching the threshold. "I need to speak with Mr. Hale. It's urgent." The man's eyes narrowed, taking in her appearance properly for the first time. Travel-stained dress, wind-blown hair, the desperate edge in her voice. "It's past 9 o'clock. Decent women don't come calling at this hour." "Decent women don't run away from their weddings either, but here we are." The words came out sharper than she'd intended, exhaustion and fear making her reckless. "Please, I've walked 5 miles in the dark. I just need 5 minutes of his time." "Mr. Hale doesn't—" "Thomas, who is it?" Another voice, this one familiar despite the year that had passed. Rowan Hale appeared behind the older man, still in his shirt sleeves like he'd been working. He looked exactly as Evelyn remembered. Dark hair too long for London fashion, gray eyes that seemed to notice everything, the kind of face that wouldn't be called handsome by society standards, but had a quiet strength to it. Those gray eyes widened when they landed on Evelyn. "Miss Hartwell?" The recognition in his voice nearly undid her. She'd been half convinced he wouldn't remember her at all. "Mr. Hale," her voice cracked. "I'm sorry to arrive like this. I know it's inappropriate and presumptuous and probably insane, but I have nowhere else to go, and I remembered you said, last year at dinner, you said your door was open to anyone fleeing London's madness. And I'm definitely fleeing, and it's definitely madness, so I hoped." She was babbling. She forced herself to stop, to breathe. Rowan Hale studied her for a moment that stretched too long. Then he stepped past Thomas and out into the wind. "You're shivering. How long have you been walking?" "I don't know. An hour? Maybe more." "Thomas, have Mrs. Gill prepare the blue room, and get some tea sent up, something hot." He turned back to Evelyn, his expression unreadable. "Come inside before you freeze to death." The relief hit her so hard she swayed. Rowan reached out to steady her, his hand on her elbow surprisingly gentle. "Easy. When did you last eat?" "Yesterday, I think." The coach stopped for lunch, but She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't explain that her stomach had been in knots for 2 days straight. "Right, tea and food then. We can discuss whatever catastrophe brought you to my doorstep after you've warmed up." He guided her inside, and the warmth of the house hit her like a physical thing. She'd been cold for so long she'd almost forgotten what warmth felt like. The hallway was simpler than her father's London townhouse, stone floors instead of marble, plain wooden furniture instead of gilded pieces. But it felt more real somehow, more solid. Thomas had disappeared, presumably to wake the unfortunate Mrs. Gill. Rowan led Evelyn to a sitting room where a fire burned in the hearth. She gravitated toward it immediately, holding her hands out to the flames. "You said you've been walking for an hour." Rowan's voice came from behind her. "Where's your luggage?" "Left it at the posting station. A boy's watching it. I couldn't carry it and walk 5 miles in the dark." Sensible, I suppose, though most women would have waited until morning to make the journey. Most women aren't running away from their weddings 3 days before the ceremony. The words hung in the air. Evelyn kept her eyes on the fire, couldn't bring herself to turn and see his reaction. I see. His voice gave nothing away. And does this wedding happen to involve Alexander Ashford, Duke of Ashford? That made her turn. How did you know? It was announced in the Times. Your father was quite proud when he wrote to inform me of the match. Something flickered in Rowan's expression. He wanted me to know that his railway investment would be even more secure once his daughter married into one of England's oldest titles. Of course, because that's all it had ever been to her father. A business arrangement. Evelyn felt suddenly sick. Are you going to send me back? That depends. Are you here because you had a fight with your fiancé, or because you actually intend not to marry him? I overheard him tell my cousin Clara that he doesn't love me, that he's only marrying me for my father's fortune. The words tasted like ash. And Clara, she's been his mistress, maybe for months. I don't even know how long. Rowan was quiet for a moment. Then he moved to a sideboard, poured amber liquid into 2 glasses. He held one out to Evelyn. What is it? Whiskey. You look like you need it. She'd never had whiskey in her life. Ladies drank sherry, maybe wine with dinner, but she took the glass and swallowed, immediately gasped as the liquid burned down her throat. Easy. Rowan's mouth twitched with something that might have been amusement. It's not meant to be gulped. You could have warned me. Where's the fun in that? It was such an unexpected response that Evelyn almost laughed. Almost. The whiskey was warming her from the inside, loosening something tight in her chest. So, Rowan said, settling into a chair and gesturing for her to do the same. You fled London, left your wedding dress hanging in your room, and walked 5 miles in the dark to show up on my doorstep. What exactly are you hoping I'll do about it? I don't know. The honesty felt dangerous. Hide me? Help me figure out what to do next? I haven't thought beyond getting away from London. Your parents will look for you. I know. Ashford will look for you. He's not going to let a fortune slip through his fingers without a fight. I know that too. And you came here anyway. Evelyn met his eyes. You're the only person I could think of who might understand, who might not immediately send word to my father or lecture me about duty and reputation. Why would you think that? Because you left London too. Everyone says you're a recluse, that you've refused every invitation for years. You built a life away from all of that. She gestured vaguely, meaning London, society, the suffocating expectations. I thought you might know how to survive it. The door opened before Rowan could respond. An older woman entered with a tea tray, her gray hair in a neat bun, and her expression professionally blank despite the late hour. Mrs. Jill, thank you. Rowan stood. This is Miss Hartwell. She'll be staying in the blue room tonight. Of course, sir. Mrs. Gill set down the tray, her eyes flicking to Evelyn with curiosity but no judgment. I've had the bed warmed. Will the lady be needing anything else? Privacy, Rowan said, and discretion. Always, sir. She left as quietly as she'd come. Evelyn reached for the tea with shaking hands. It was strong and sweet, nothing like the delicate blends her mother preferred. She drank it anyway, grateful for the heat. You need to eat. Rowan pushed a plate toward her. Bread, cheese, cold meat. Simple food, but Evelyn's stomach growled at the sight of it. She ate mechanically, barely tasting anything. Rowan watched her in silence, his own whiskey untouched. What's your plan? He finally asked. I don't have one. Then let me be blunt. You're 23 years old, unmarried, with no money of your own, and no skills that would allow you to support yourself. Your reputation is about to be destroyed, your family will disown you, and you've run to a bachelor's household in Cornwall, which will make the scandal even worse when it gets out. And it will get out. Each word landed like a blow. Evelyn set down her tea, her hands trembling again. I know all of that, but I couldn't marry him, Mr. Hale. I couldn't stand at that altar knowing what I know and promise to love and honor a man who sees me as nothing more than a bank draft. So you chose scandal and ruin instead. I chose myself. The words came out fiercer than she'd expected. For the first time in my life, I chose what I wanted instead of what everyone else wanted for me. Maybe that was stupid, Maybe I'll regret it, but right now, right this minute, I don't. Rowan studied her for a long moment. Then he picked up his whiskey and drank. Fair enough. That's it? Fair enough? What do you want me to say? That you're brave? Foolish? Both are probably true. He leaned back in his chair. You can stay here tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out something more permanent. You're helping me. It came out as a statement, but it felt like a question. I'm giving you a bed for the night. We can debate the definition of help in the morning. He stood. Mrs. Gill will show you to your room. Try to sleep. Things always look different in daylight. But Evelyn didn't move. Why? Why what? Why are you helping me at all? We met once for a few hours over a year ago. You have no obligation to me. No reason to get involved in what's about to become a massive scandal. Rowan was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because I remember that dinner. I remember thinking that you were wasted in London, playing at being decorative when you clearly had more going on behind your eyes than anyone gave you credit for. He met her gaze directly. And because I know what it's like to run from a life that doesn't fit, even when everyone tells you it should. Something in his voice made Evelyn want to ask what he'd run from. But before she could, he was already moving toward the door. Get some rest, Miss Hartwell. Tomorrow's going to be complicated. The blue room was smaller than her bedroom in London, but somehow more comfortable. The bed was soft, the linen smelled of lavender, and the window looked out over the dark sea. Evelyn could hear the waves crashing against the cliffs, rhythmic and endless. She didn't think she'd sleep. Her mind kept spinning through everything that had happened, everything she'd done, everything that was about to come crashing down. But exhaustion won out eventually, and she fell into a dreamless black void that was almost like peace. Morning came too soon. Sunlight streamed through the window, and for a moment Evelyn didn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back. London, Alexander, the journey, Rowan Hale's unexpected mercy. A knock on the door. Miss? Mrs. Gill's voice. I've brought water for washing, and there's breakfast downstairs when you're ready. Evelyn cleaned up as best she could with the water and her limited supplies. Her dress was wrinkled from sleeping in it, her hair a disaster. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman who'd fled her life with nothing but desperation and hope. Downstairs she found Rowan in what appeared to be his study, papers spread across a massive oak desk. He looked up when she entered. How do you take your coffee? I don't usually drink coffee. You do now. Tea's for people with time to waste. He poured from a pot that looked like it had seen better days. Black or with milk? Milk, please. He handed her a cup. The coffee was strong enough to strip paint, but Evelyn drank it anyway. I sent Thomas to collect your trunk this morning. He should be back within the hour. Rowan shuffled some papers. In the meantime, we need to discuss your situation. My impending ruin, you mean? If you want to be dramatic about it, yes. He pulled out a chair for her. Sit. Let's think through this logically. Evelyn sat, cradling the terrible coffee. What's there to think through? I've destroyed my reputation, my family will disown me, and I have no prospects for the future. It's fairly straightforward. Nothing's ever straightforward. First question, do you want to go back? No. Not even to try to salvage things? Apologize? Claim you had a nervous episode? Marry Ashford anyway? The thought made her stomach turn. I'd rather die. Dramatic, but noted. Rowan made a mark on one of his papers. Second question. Are you prepared for your father to cut you off completely? Because he will. I know. Do you? Because it's one thing to understand it intellectually, and another to actually live with the reality. No money means no options. It means working for your living in whatever capacity you can find. Governess, if you're lucky, seamstress or laundress if you're not. I'm prepared. She wasn't, not really, but she tried to sound convincing. Rowan didn't look convinced either. Third question, what do you think Ashford will do when he realizes you're gone? Come after me, I suppose. Try to convince me to change my mind. He'll do more than try. Rowan's voice was grim. He's about to lose access to a massive fortune. Men like that don't accept loss gracefully. He'll come here, and he'll make a scene. Then what do I do? That depends on what you want. Rowan leaned back in his chair. You could hide. I could claim I never saw you, send him on a wild goose chase, but that only delays things. Or, or you could face him. Make it clear that you know about his affair with your cousin, that the marriage is over, and that no amount of manipulation will change your mind. The thought of confronting Alexander made Evelyn's heart race. I don't know if I can. Then you're not as done with your old life as you think you are. The words stung because they were true. Part of her still wanted to avoid conflict, to smooth things over, to make everyone happy except herself. That was 23 years of training, fighting against 2 days of freedom. I can do it, she forced the words out. When he comes, I'll face him. Good, because he'll be here soon. Your father's probably already figured out where you've gone. I'm the only person you've had contact with outside London society. Right on cue, there was a commotion from the front of the house. Voices, one of them raised and angry. Thomas saying something about Mr. Hale not being available. And then a voice Evelyn knew too well. I don't care if he's available. I know she's here. Alexander. Rowan's eyes met Evelyn's. Faster than I expected. Are you ready for this? No, she wasn't ready at all. But she stood anyway, her knees only shaking slightly. As ready as I'll ever be. They went to the front hall together. Alexander was there, looking travel-worn and furious. He was still handsome, that hadn't changed. Fair hair, aristocratic features, the kind of looks that made mothers shove their daughters at him. But Evelyn saw him differently now, saw the calculation in his eyes, the practiced charm that hid pure self-interest. His expression shifted when he saw her. Relief, then anger, then something almost like concern, playing the worried fiancé. Evelyn, thank heavens, your parents are beside themselves with worry. Are they? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Or are they beside themselves that I've ruined their plans? That's not fair. Your mother has been crying for 2 days straight. Because she's worried about me, or because she's worried about what her friends will say. Alexander's jaw tightened. He glanced at Rowan. Could we have a moment alone? This is a private family matter. Miss Hartwell is a guest in my house, Rowan said calmly. If she wants privacy, I'll provide it, but she hasn't asked for it. I don't want to be alone with him. Evelyn was surprised by how firm her voice sounded. Anything he has to say, he can say in front of you. Evelyn, please. I don't know what's gotten into you, but this is madness. You can't just run away from your wedding. I can. I did. Your father is threatening to ruin me financially if you don't come back. He says I've compromised you somehow, driven you away. Alexander took a step closer. Just come home. We'll sort everything out. Will we sort out your affair with my cousin too? The words dropped like stones. Alexander went pale, then red. I don't know what you think you heard. I heard you tell Clara that you don't love me, that you're only marrying me for my father's money, that I'm pleasant enough and dutiful and will make an acceptable duchess. Each word was a knife she was happy to twist. I heard everything, Alexander, so don't stand there and lie to me. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. For once, his practiced charm failed him. It's not... You don't understand the pressure I've been under. The estate is falling apart, drowning in debt. I don't care. Evelyn felt something fierce rising in her chest. You should have been honest. You should have told me you needed the money instead of pretending to court me. I might have respected that. But you lied. You let me believe you cared when all you saw was a fortune in skirts. That's not true. I do care about you. You care about my father's money. There's a difference. Alexander's expression hardened. The mask was slipping, showing the calculation underneath. Fine. You want honesty? Here it is. Without your father's investment, I lose everything. The estate, the title's reputation, everything my family has built for generations. So yes, I need this marriage, and you need it too, whether you want to admit it or not. Why would I need to marry a man who doesn't love me? Because what's your alternative? He gestured at the room, at Rowan, at everything. Living here as this man's charity case? Becoming a governess? A paid companion? You're ruined, Evelyn. No decent man will have you now. Your father will cut you off. Your mother will never speak to you again. You'll have nothing. I'll have my self-respect. Self-respect doesn't keep you fed. It doesn't put a roof over your head. Alexander's voice dropped, became almost gentle, almost convincing. Come back with me. We'll tell everyone you had a moment of wedding nerves, completely understandable. The ceremony can still go forward. Everything can go back to normal. I don't want normal. The clarity of it surprised her. I want to be able to look at myself in the mirror without feeling sick. I want to make my own choices, even if they're the wrong ones. I want to live a life that's actually mine. You're being ridiculous. She's being brave, Rowan's voice cut across Alexander's. And you're being exactly what she accused you of. A man who sees women as property. Alexander rounded on him. Stay out of this. This doesn't concern you. You're in my house, shouting at my guest. I'd say it concerns me plenty. Your guest? Is that what we're calling it? Alexander's sneer was ugly. Everyone's going to assume you seduced her away, that this whole thing is some scheme to get your hands on Hartwell's money for yourself. Let them assume what they want. I know the truth, and so does Miss Hartwell. And what truth is that? Alexander stepped closer to Rowan, aggressive. That you're just being a good Samaritan? Please, you want something. Everyone wants something. I want her to have a choice, something you never gave her. The two men faced each other, tension crackling between them. Evelyn stepped between them before things could escalate. Alexander, leave. He turned to her, and for a second she saw something that might have been genuine regret in his eyes. Or maybe she was just imagining it. Evelyn, please, don't throw away your entire future for pride. I'm not throwing it away. I'm taking it back. She moved toward the door, opened it. Go home. Tell my parents I'm not coming back. Tell them I'm sorry for the embarrassment, but I'm not sorry for leaving. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. Alexander stared at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Rowan. You think you're being noble, but you're just delaying the inevitable. She'll realize she can't survive without her family's money. She'll come crawling back, and when she does, I might not be willing to forgive this embarrassment. I think you'll find, Rowan said quietly, that she's stronger than you ever gave her credit for. Alexander laughed, bitter and sharp. We'll see. He stalked to the door, paused on the threshold. When you come to your senses, Evelyn, don't expect me to welcome you with open arms. I have my pride too. Good. You'll need it when you're explaining to London society why your heiress bride ran away. He left without another word. Evelyn closed the door and leaned against it, her whole body shaking now that the confrontation was over. You did well, Rowan said. I feel like I'm going to be sick. That's normal. The first time you stand up to someone who's been controlling you, it feels wrong. Give it time. Evelyn pushed away from the door. He's right about one thing. I don't have any money. I don't have any skills. I can't stay here indefinitely living on your charity. No, Rowan agreed. You can't. The bluntness of it stung, even though she'd known it was true. So what do I do? Rowan was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then, there's a possibility. It's unconventional. You'll probably hate it. Tell me anyway. You could marry me. The words hung in the air like something solid. Evelyn stared at him, certain she'd misheard. What? It's practical. If you're married, your father can't force you home. Alexander can't touch you. You'd have legal protection, financial security. He held up a hand before she could interrupt. I'm not proposing because I'm madly in love with you. I'm proposing because it solves both our problems. Both? What problem does marrying me solve for you? London society has been trying to marry me off for years. My mother still sends letters with lists of suitable women. This would end that permanently, and he hesitated. I could use someone to help run the house, manage things. Mrs. Jill is getting older. Thomas is better with the grounds than the administration. You're clearly intelligent. You've been trained in household management. It would be a practical arrangement. A practical arrangement? Evelyn's voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. You mean a marriage in name only? I mean a partnership. We'd be honest with each other, no pretense of love, but mutual respect. You'd have your freedom, your own rooms, your own life. I'd have help managing the estate and society off my back. We'd both get what we need. It was possibly the most unromantic proposal in history. And yet, something about the honesty of it appealed to Evelyn more than any flowery declaration could have. I need to think about it. Of course, take your time. But Evelyn, he met her eyes. This offer expires the moment your father arrives, because he will arrive. Probably tomorrow. And when he does, you need to have a decision made. Marry you or go back to London? Those are your options, yes. Evelyn looked around the house, this strange, honest place that was nothing like her father's townhouse or Alexander's grand estate. It wasn't what she'd imagined for her life, but then nothing about the past 3 days had been what she'd imagined. Can I ask you something? Anything. If we did this, if I said yes, would you regret it? Rowan considered the question. I don't know. Ask me in a year. The honesty of it made her laugh, sharp and surprised. That's a terrible answer. It's an honest one. I can't predict the future any more than you can. But I can promise I won't lie to you, won't manipulate you, won't see you as property or a means to an end. That's more than most marriages offer. He was right about that. How many society marriages were based on nothing more than money and status? At least this one would be honest about it. I'll think about it, she said again. Good. Now come have some breakfast before Mrs. Gill thinks I'm starving our guest. They ate in the small dining room overlooking the sea. The food was simple but good. Eggs, toast, jam from the kitchen garden. Evelyn found she was actually hungry for the first time in days. What's Cornwall like? She asked. I've never been this far from London. Wild. Beautiful. Unforgiving. Rowan buttered his toast. The weather's terrible half the year. The nearest town is small and provincial. There's no theater, no balls, none of the entertainments you're used to. You're really selling this. I'm being honest. If you stay, married or not, it's going to be difficult. You'll be bored sometimes, lonely sometimes. It's not an easy life. As opposed to my London life, which was so fulfilling? He smiled at that. Fair point. They spent the rest of the day in what Evelyn could only describe as strange domesticity. Rowan showed her around the house, introduced her to the small staff, Mrs. Gill, Thomas, and a young kitchen maid named Annie. Everyone was polite but curious, clearly wondering what this London lady was doing in their quiet household. Evelyn helped Mrs. Gill with some mending, walked the grounds with Thomas learning about the estate, even tried her hand at kneading bread in the kitchen. Her hands were soft from years of being decorative. The work left them aching. But it felt real. More real than any afternoon tea or calling card ritual ever had. That evening, she stood at her bedroom window and watched the sun set over the ocean. Tomorrow her father would probably arrive. Tomorrow, she'd have to make a choice that would determine the rest of her life. Marry Rowan Hale and stay in Cornwall, or go back to London and face whatever consequences her father deemed appropriate. There was a knock at her door. Rowan, looking tired and somehow younger without his jacket and cravat. I wanted to make something clear, he said, about my proposal. Yes? If you say no, if you decide to go back or find another solution, I won't be offended. This isn't about my ego. It's about giving you options. And if I say yes, then we'll make it work, somehow. He ran a hand through his hair. I'm not good at this, at talking about feelings or making grand gestures, but I meant what I said about respect, about honesty. I think we could build something decent together, maybe even something good. Evelyn turned back to the window. The last light was fading from the sky, stars beginning to emerge. Can I ask why you left London? What you were running from? Rowan was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, expectations. My father wanted me to be one kind of man, political, social, ambitious. I wanted to be left alone to read and work and live quietly. We fought about it for years. When he died, I inherited everything and immediately left. Haven't been back since. Do you regret it? No, I'm happier here in Cornwall, managing my small estate and avoiding society, than I ever was in London being what everyone else wanted. He paused. That's why I understand what you're doing, why I'm willing to help. Thank you. The words felt inadequate. For everything. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you've made your decision. He left her alone with her thoughts. Evelyn stood at the window until full dark, watching the stars multiply across the sky. Somewhere in London, her mother was probably crying. Her father was probably raging. Alexander was probably scheming. And here she was, on a clifftop in Cornwall, contemplating marrying a man she barely knew to escape a life she'd never wanted. It should have felt terrifying. Instead, it felt like the first honest choice she'd ever made. The next morning dawned gray and rainy. Evelyn woke to the sound of water lashing against the windows and the distant rumble of thunder. She dressed carefully in her best dress, wrinkled as it was, and pinned her hair back with shaking hands. Today. Whatever happened, it would happen today. She found Rowan already in his study, papers spread across his desk. He looked up when she entered. "Sleep well?" "Not particularly. You?" "Same." He set down his pen. "I've been thinking about practicalities. If you do decide to stay..." A commotion from outside cut him off. The sound of horses, carriage wheels, raised voices, Thomas shouting something, and then footsteps, heavy and purposeful, storming through the house. The study door burst open. Evelyn's father stood there, rain-soaked and furious, his face red with rage. Behind him, two men, servants or hired thugs. Evelyn couldn't tell which. "There you are!" His voice was a whip crack. "Get your things! You're coming home, now!" Evelyn stood frozen. In all her imaginings of this confrontation, she'd never quite prepared for the reality of her father's fury. Rowan rose slowly from his desk. "Mr. Hartwell, perhaps we should discuss this calmly. Don't you dare speak to me." Her father's attention swung to Rowan. "You've compromised my daughter, sheltered a runaway. I should have you arrested." "I've done nothing illegal. Miss Hartwell came here of her own free will." "She's my daughter. She doesn't have free will until she's married or of age." "She's 23, Rowan said quietly. "She's of age." The words seemed to enrage her father further. He turned back to Evelyn. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The humiliation you've caused? The Duke has withdrawn his offer. Your mother is being shunned by her friends. And you're here, playing house with some reclusive nobody. Father, please. No, I've had enough. You're coming home if I have to drag you myself." He moved toward her. Evelyn backed up instinctively, bumping into Rowan's desk. This was it. The moment where she either stood her ground or let herself be taken back to London like a recalcitrant child. "I'm not going back." The words came out smaller than she'd intended. Her father barely seemed to hear them. "You don't have a choice." "She does, actually." Rowan stepped between them. "And she's made it." Her father's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Evelyn looked at Rowan, at his calm gray eyes that held an unspoken question. Last chance to back out. Last chance to change her mind. She turned to her father. "I'm marrying Mr. Hale." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the rain seemed to pause, holding its breath. Evelyn's father stared at her like she'd announced she was joining a traveling circus. The two men behind him shifted uncomfortably, clearly not paid enough to deal with family drama. "You're what?" Her father's voice was dangerously quiet. "I'm marrying Mr. Hale." Evelyn forced herself to stand straighter, to meet her father's eyes. "Today, if possible." "The hell you are!" Her father lunged forward, but Rowan was faster, stepping fully between them with a hand raised. "That's close enough, Mr. Hartwell. Get out of my way. This doesn't concern you. Your daughter just accepted my proposal of marriage. I'd say it concerns me quite a bit." Her father's face went from red to purple. "You planned this. Seduced her away from a duke to get your hands on her inheritance." "I don't want her inheritance." Rowan's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "In fact, I'm happy to sign whatever legal documents you'd like stating that I have no claim to any Hartwell money. This marriage is about giving your daughter a choice that doesn't involve being sold to a man who is using her." "Sold?" "I gave her the match of the season. You gave her to a man who was sleeping with her cousin and only wanted her fortune." Evelyn found her voice again, stronger this time. "Did you know about Clara and Alexander? Did you know he told her he didn't love me?" Her father's expression flickered, just for a second, with something that might have been guilt. "What a man does before marriage is his own business. Once you were wed, he would have been faithful." "Would he? Or would you have just pretended not to notice?" Evelyn felt something hot and sharp rising in her chest. "Like you pretend not to notice that Mother takes laudanum every night because she's miserable?" Like you pretend not to notice that your entire life is about appearances and money and never about what's actually real? You ungrateful. I'm done being grateful for a cage. The words came out stronger than she'd ever spoken to him. I'm done pretending that being traded for a title is some kind of honor. I'm marrying Mr. Hale because he's offered me something you never did, a choice. Her father looked between them, his jaw working. You think you're making a choice? You're ruining yourself. When this man tires of you, and he will, you'll have nowhere to go. I won't take you back. I'm not asking you to. Your mother will never speak to you again. Then I'll learn to live without her. I'll cut you off completely, not a penny, not a reference. Your name will be struck from the family records. Each threat landed like a punch, but Evelyn didn't flinch. I understand. Her father stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time, or maybe seeing her clearly for the first time and not liking what he saw. You're just like your grandmother, stubborn and foolish. Grandmother left her first husband because he beat her. Evelyn had heard the story in whispers, the family shame that was never discussed openly. She rebuilt her life and married for love the second time. You told me once that she was the strongest woman you'd ever known. That was different. It wasn't. She made a choice. I'm making mine. Her father's hands clenched into fists at his sides. For a moment, Evelyn thought he might actually try to grab her, force her into the carriage. But then he seemed to deflate slightly, age catching up with him all at once. If you do this, he said quietly, there's no coming back. You understand that? I understand. You'll be dead to me, to your mother, to everyone in London. I know. He looked at Rowan. You're a fool if you think this will end well. She's been raised soft, useless. She can't cook or clean or do any actual work. Give it a month and she'll be crying to come home. Then that's her decision to make. Rowan's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. Not yours. Her father's laugh was bitter. Fine, marry him. Live in this God-forsaken place. But when you realize what you've thrown away, when you're scrubbing floors and darning socks because you can't afford servants, don't expect my sympathy. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Your mother wanted me to tell you she loves you, that she'll pray for you to come to your senses. His voice cracked slightly. I wanted you to be happy, Evelyn. That's all this was ever about. No, Father. You wanted me to be successful. There's a difference. He left without another word, his hired men trailing behind him. The front door slammed, rattling the windows. The sound of carriage wheels faded into the rain. Evelyn stood frozen, her whole body trembling. She'd done it. Actually done it. Burned every bridge, severed every tie. She was completely, utterly alone except for a man she barely knew and a staff of strangers. Sit down before you fall down. Rowan guided her to a chair, pressed a glass of something into her hands. Whiskey again. She drank without thinking, welcomed the burn. I just told my father to go to hell. You did. I'm disowned. You are. And I agreed to marry you. That too. Rowan sat across from her, his own glass in hand. Having second thoughts? About a dozen per minute. Evelyn laughed, high and slightly hysterical. What did I just do? Made a choice. Possibly a terrible one, but a choice nonetheless. That's not reassuring. I'm not trying to be reassuring, I'm trying to be honest. He swirled the whiskey in his glass. We should probably discuss logistics, if we're actually doing this. Logistics. The word felt absurd given the magnitude of what had just happened. Right, logistics. The marriage needs to happen quickly. Today, if possible. Your father will try to have it stopped if we delay. Can he do that? He can try. Create legal obstacles, claim you're not of sound mind, any number of things. But if we're already married, there's nothing he can do. Evelyn set down her glass with shaking hands. So we find a vicar, get married, just like that. Just like that. Rowan stood, moved to his desk. I'll send Thomas to fetch Reverend Michaels. He's the local vicar, knows me well enough not to ask too many questions. And then what? We just live together? Pretend to be a married couple? We'll be a married couple. No pretending necessary. He pulled out paper and pen, began writing. As for living arrangements, the house is large enough for us each to have our own space. We'll work out the details as we go. It all sounded so practical, so businesslike. Nothing like the romantic notions Evelyn had been raised with about marriage and love and happily ever after. Maybe that was better. Maybe practicality was more honest than romance. I don't know how to run a household like this, she admitted. Mrs. Gill manages everything in London. I just attend parties and look decorative. Then you'll learn. Mrs. Gill here will teach you. So will Annie. It's not as complicated as you think. And if I'm terrible at it, then you'll be terrible at it. We'll manage. He looked up from his writing. Evelyn, I'm not expecting you to transform into some perfect country wife. I'm expecting you to be yourself and figure out what that means away from London. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Gill, looking worried. Begging your pardon, sir, but there's another visitor. Rowan frowned. Who? Says her name is Clara Hartwell, the young lady's cousin. Evelyn's stomach dropped. Clara's here? Should I send her away? Mrs. Gill asked. Evelyn looked at Rowan, who raised an eyebrow. The decision was hers. No, Evelyn said slowly. Show her in. Clara appeared moments later, looking windblown and miserable. Her traveling dress was expensive but mud-splattered, her hair escaping its pins. She looked nothing like the polished society girl Evelyn remembered. Evelyn. Clara's voice broke on the name. Thank heaven. I was afraid I'd missed you. Missed me for what? To gloat about stealing my fiancé? Clara flinched like she'd been slapped. No. To apologize, to explain. She glanced at Rowan. Could we speak privately? Anything you have to say, you can say in front of Mr. Hale. Evelyn was surprised by how cold her own voice sounded. He knows everything. Everything? Clara went pale. About Alexander and me. Yes. Oh. Clara's hands twisted in her skirt. Then you must hate me. I don't know what I feel about you. That's part of why I left. Evelyn stayed in her chair, refused to make this easier. What are you doing here, Clara? I came to tell you the truth. About Alexander. About all of it. Clara took a shaky breath. It wasn't what you think. Not entirely. He told you he loved you. That he was only marrying me for money. I heard you both. You did. And that was true. But what you didn't hear was what happened after. Clara's eyes filled with tears. He used me, Evelyn. The same way he was using you. He made me think I was special, that once he had your fortune, he'd leave you and marry me. But that was never the plan. I don't understand. His mother found out about us, about the affair. She told Alexander that if he didn't go through with marrying you, she'd cut him off completely. So he was going to marry you, take your money, and then discard both of us. Clara's voice was bitter. I was just entertainment. A way to pass the time before he chained himself to a wealthy wife. Evelyn felt sick. When did you learn this? 2 days ago, after you ran. His mother came to my family's house, told me everything, said I was a foolish girl who'd nearly ruined a profitable arrangement. The tears spilled over. I loved him, Evelyn. I know that's awful to say after what I did to you, but I did. And he didn't care about either of us. The room was quiet except for Clara's ragged breathing. Rowan moved to the sideboard, poured water, handed it to Clara without a word. Why are you telling me this? Evelyn asked. Because you deserve to know. Because I'm sorry. Because... Clara drank the water, set the glass down with shaking hands. Because running away was the bravest thing I've ever seen anyone do, and I wanted you to know you were right about everything. That doesn't change what you did, what you both did. I know, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking you to understand that I was stupid and foolish, and he was a better liar than either of us realized. Evelyn studied her cousin. They'd grown up together, shared secrets and dreams and endless summers. Before Alexander, they'd been close, almost like sisters. Did you come all this way just to apologize? Partly, and partly because... Clara's voice dropped. Your father is planning something. I overheard him talking to his solicitor before he left London. He's going to try to have you declared mentally unfit, get legal guardianship, force you to come back. He can't do that. I'm 23. He can try. And with enough money and enough pressure, he might succeed, especially if you're living in sin with an unmarried man. Clara looked between them. Unless you're not. Living in sin, I mean. We're getting married today. Clara's eyebrows shot up. Today? That's fast. It's necessary. Rowan spoke for the first time. If Hartwell is planning legal action, being married protects Evelyn. A husband has more legal rights than a father. Then you should do it now. This afternoon, if possible. Clara pulled an envelope from her bag. I stole these from your father's study. Legal documents he was planning to use. You should know what you're up against. Evelyn took the envelope, broke the seal. Inside were papers thick with legal language, but the gist was clear. Her father was petitioning to have her placed under medical supervision for hysteria and nervous collapse. If it went through, she'd have no rights at all. This is insane. It's desperate, Rowan corrected, reading over her shoulder. And desperate men do dangerous things. Clara stood. I should go. I just wanted to warn you, and to say... She met Evelyn's eyes. I'm glad you got away. From all of it. You deserve better than what London had planned for you. Where will you go? Back to London, I suppose. Face the scandal. My parents are furious, but they won't disown me. I'm all they have. Clara's smile was sad. Maybe I'll find a quiet husband who doesn't care that I was foolish once. Or maybe I'll become a spinster aunt. Either way, it's better than living a lie. Something in Evelyn softened slightly. Thank you for coming, for the warning. It's the least I could do. Clara moved toward the door, paused. For what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. Mr. Hale seems like a decent man. That's rarer than you'd think. After Clara left, Evelyn and Rowan sat in silence for a long moment. Well, Rowan finally said, that was unexpected. Everything about the past 3 days has been unexpected. Evelyn looked at the legal papers again, felt anger rising. My father is trying to have me declared insane. He's trying to control you. It's what he's always done. Not anymore. Evelyn stood, decision crystallizing. Send for the vicar. Let's get married before my father can file those papers. Rowan studied her. Are you sure? This is permanent. So is being declared mentally unfit and locked away. At least this way I'm choosing my own cage. It doesn't have to be a cage. No? Evelyn turned to him. What is it then? A partnership, an arrangement, a chance to build something different than what either of us had before. He stood as well, moved closer. I know this isn't what you dreamed of as a girl. No grand romance, no love at first sight, but it's honest, and it's yours to shape however you want. The honesty of it was almost painful. Evelyn thought about her grandmother, who'd left her first husband and rebuilt her life. Thought about the wedding dress hanging in her London bedroom, symbol of everything she'd been trained to want and everything she'd learned to fear. All right, let's do this. Thomas rode to fetch Reverend Michaels while Mrs. Gill and Annie transformed the small parlor into something resembling a wedding venue. Flowers from the garden, candles, a hastily pressed tablecloth serving as something like an altar cloth. It was nothing like the St. George's ceremony Evelyn had been planning. No orchestra, no imported roses, no guests in their finest. Just Evelyn, Rowan, and a handful of people who'd known them for days at most. Evelyn changed into her best dress, still wrinkled, still travel-worn, but the closest thing she had to wedding attire. Annie helped pin her hair, stuck a few wildflowers in it that looked more cheerful than elegant. You look lovely, miss, Annie said quietly. Evelyn looked at herself in the small mirror. She looked terrified, but also somehow more herself than she had in years. Reverend Michaels arrived within the hour. An elderly man with kind eyes and the weathered look of someone who'd spent his life in coastal parishes. He took in the hasty preparations, the unusual circumstances, and asked only one question. Are you doing this of your own free will, Miss Hartwell? I am. Then let's begin. The ceremony was short, practical, nothing like the elaborate service Evelyn had memorized for her wedding to Alexander. No choir, no readings, just the essential vows. Mrs. Gill and Thomas served as witnesses. Annie cried quietly in the corner. Do you, Evelyn Margaret Hartwell, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? This was it. Last chance to back out. Last chance to change her mind. Evelyn looked at Rowan. He looked back steadily, no pressure in his eyes. Just patience. Just respect. I do. And do you, Rowan Edward Hale, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. It was done. In less time than it took to drink a cup of tea, Evelyn Hartwell became Evelyn Hale. Married to a man she barely knew, in a house at the edge of nowhere, with no family present and no future certain. The Reverend produced the marriage certificate. Evelyn signed with shaking hands, watched Rowan sign below her name. Mrs. Gill and Thomas added their signatures as witnesses. Legal, binding, permanent. Congratulations, Reverend Michaels said warmly. May your marriage be blessed with happiness and understanding. After he left, Mrs. Gill produced a simple meal, bread, cheese, a good wine from the cellar, a wedding breakfast that bore no resemblance to the elaborate feast Evelyn's mother had been planning. To the bride and groom, Thomas said, raising his glass. They drank. Evelyn tasted nothing. As evening fell, the reality of what she'd done started to sink in. She was married to Rowan Hale. She'd be sleeping in this house, waking up in this house, living in this house for the rest of her life. I've had Mrs. Gill prepare the blue room for you, Rowan said as they finished the meal. And the room adjoining it is mine. There's a connecting door, but it locks from your side. Oh. The practicality of it was somehow both reassuring and disappointing. So we're not sharing a bed? No. Not unless you want to, and you clearly don't. He poured more wine. This marriage is about protection and partnership, not obligation. What if people talk? Your staff must think it's strange. My staff knows to keep their thoughts to themselves, and anyone else's opinion is irrelevant. He met her eyes. You're safe here, Evelyn. From your father, from Alexander, from anyone who wants to control you. That was the point. She wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Too much had happened too fast. Her emotions were a tangled mess she couldn't begin to sort through. Thank you, she said quietly. For this, for all of it. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you've spent a week doing household accounts and learning to manage a kitchen. Despite everything, Evelyn smiled. That bad? Worse, Mrs. Gill is a tyrant about organization. I heard that, sir. Mrs. Gill called from the doorway, but she was smiling. Later, alone in the blue room, Evelyn sat by the window and watched the sea. The waves crashed against the cliffs, relentless and eternal. Somewhere in London, her mother was probably still crying. Her father was probably plotting his next move. Alexander was probably furious that his profitable marriage had slipped through his fingers. And here she was, married to a recluse living in Cornwall with no money and no clear future. It should have terrified her. Instead, for the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe. The next few days passed in a strange blur. Evelyn learned the rhythms of the household. Early mornings, simple meals, work that needed doing. Mrs. Gill taught her how to plan menus, how to manage household supplies, how to read the account books. Annie showed her how to mend clothes properly, how to help in the kitchen without getting in the way. Rowan mostly stayed out of her way, spending his days managing the estate and his evenings in his study. They ate dinner together, made polite conversation, then retired to their separate rooms like the business partners they were. It was fine, comfortable even, and completely hollow. On the 5th day of her marriage, Evelyn woke to find a letter slipped under her door. Her mother's handwriting. Her hands shook as she opened it. Dearest Evelyn, your father has forbidden me from writing to you, but I cannot bear the silence. Please know that I love you, even if I don't understand what you've done. London is talking of nothing else. The scandal is enormous. Alexander has left for the continent. Claire's family has sent her to stay with relatives in Scotland. I want to believe you're happy, that this choice was right for you, but I cannot help but worry. Please write to me, even if it's just to tell me you're well. Your loving mother. Evelyn read the letter 3 times, felt tears finally come. Her mother had defied her father's orders to send this, had risked his anger to reach out. She wrote back immediately. Dear Mother, I am well. Better than well, perhaps. Different. I'm learning to manage a household properly, not just look decorative in one. The work is hard but honest. Mr. Hale is kind and respectful. We have an understanding. I'm sorry for the scandal, sorry for the pain I've caused you, but I'm not sorry for leaving. Alexander didn't love me. He was using me, using us all. You deserve to know that. Please don't worry. I'm finding my way. Your daughter, Evelyn. She gave the letter to Thomas to post, felt something loosen in her chest. One bridge not completely burned. That afternoon, she was helping Mrs. Gill in the kitchen when Rowan appeared, his expression grim. We have a problem. Evelyn set down the vegetables she'd been peeling. What kind of problem? Your father has filed his petition. The court is requiring you to appear for a medical examination to determine your mental fitness. The knife slipped from Evelyn's hand, clattered on the counter. When? 2 weeks. In London. Rowan handed her the official-looking document. If you don't appear, they can issue a warrant. If you do appear and the doctors declare you unfit, your father gets legal guardianship. Even though I'm married? He's claiming the marriage was made under duress, that you weren't in your right mind. If the doctors agree, the marriage could be annulled and you'd be placed under medical supervision. Evelyn felt the walls closing in. She'd thought marriage would protect her. She'd been wrong. What do I do? Fight. Rowan's voice was hard. We go to London. You submit to their examination. You prove you're perfectly sane and made your choices freely. And if they're already paid to declare me unfit, if my father has bribed the doctors, then we find doctors who can't be bribed. We build a case, we fight harder. He moved closer. I won't let him take you, Evelyn, but you have to be willing to face him again. The thought of returning to London made her sick, but the thought of being declared insane and locked away was worse. When do we leave? Tomorrow morning. We'll need witnesses, people who can testify that you're rational, capable, making sound decisions. Mrs. Jill, Thomas, even Reverend Michaels, if he'll come. They spent the rest of the day preparing, packing, writing statements, gathering documentation. Evelyn's hands shook as she folded clothes into her trunk, the same trunk she'd packed when she fled London barely a week ago. That night, she couldn't sleep. She paced her room, watched the moon reflect on the water, tried not to think about what awaited her in London. A soft knock on the connecting door. Evelyn? Are you awake? Yes. Rowan entered, fully dressed despite the late hour. I thought you might want company. Or whiskey. Or both. Despite everything, Evelyn smiled. Both sounds good. They sat by the window, passing the bottle back and forth like conspirators. The whiskey burned less than it had the first time. What if I lose? Evelyn asked quietly. What if they declare me unfit? Then we fight the ruling. Appeal. Make noise. I have money, connections. Not as many as your father, but enough to make things difficult. Why are you doing this? Really? You could walk away. Annul the marriage, claim I deceived you, avoid all of this. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Do you remember that dinner? A year ago, at your father's house? Yes. You asked me about the railway expansion, about whether I thought it was sustainable or just a speculative bubble. Do you remember that? Evelyn thought back. I remember. Father looked shocked that I'd asked a technical question. You were the only person at that table who asked me anything that wasn't about money or social connections. You actually wanted to know what I thought. He took the bottle, drank. Most people see me as either a recluse to be pitied or a fortune to be married. You saw me as a person worth talking to. That's rare. That's why you're helping me, because I was polite at dinner? I'm helping you because you deserve to make your own choices, because you're smart and capable, and you've been told your whole life that those things don't matter. He met her eyes. And because I think we could actually be friends, if you're willing. Friends. It was such a simple word, but somehow it meant more than husband and wife had when they'd stood before the vicar. I'd like that, Evelyn said. They finished the bottle as the night deepened, talked about everything and nothing, books they'd read, places they wanted to see, dreams they'd given up on. Evelyn told him about wanting to study mathematics when she was young, how her governess had laughed and taught her watercolors instead. Rowan told her about wanting to be a scholar, how his father had called it useless and pushed him toward politics. We're both disappointments, Evelyn said, slightly drunk. The best kind of disappointments, the kind that chose themselves over expectation. As dawn broke, they were still talking. The whiskey bottle was empty, and Evelyn felt something she hadn't expected. Hope. They left for London mid-morning, a small traveling party. Rowan, Evelyn, Mrs. Gill, and Thomas. The journey felt different this time. Evelyn wasn't running toward uncertainty, she was running toward a fight. London appeared on the horizon 3 days later, gray and sprawling. Evelyn's stomach clenched at the sight of it. "We're staying at my townhouse," Rowan said, "not your father's. You're not setting foot in that house again unless you want to." "I don't want to." They arrived at Rowan's London residence, smaller than her father's, but comfortable. The staff there seemed surprised to see their master with a wife, but they hid it well. The medical examination was scheduled for the following afternoon. Evelyn barely slept, ran through possible questions and answers in her head until her thoughts blurred together. The doctors arrived promptly at 2 o'clock. 3 of them, all men, all looking at Evelyn like she was a specimen to be studied. Her father was there too, watching with hard eyes. "Mrs. Hale," the lead doctor began, "or do you prefer Miss Hartwell?" "Mrs. Hale. That's my legal name now." "Indeed. And how long have you been married?" 8 days. A very sudden marriage, some might say suspiciously sudden. Some might say necessary, given that my father was trying to have me declared insane. The doctor's eyebrow rose. "You believe your father's concern for your welfare is insane?" "I believe his concern is for his reputation and his business arrangements, not for me." They asked questions for over an hour, about her decision to leave London, her relationship with Rowan, her state of mind, her future plans. Evelyn answered each one calmly, rationally, refusing to show the fear clawing at her insides. "Tell me, Mrs. Hale," one of the doctors finally said, "do you understand that your actions have caused significant distress to your family?" "I understand that my choices have had consequences. That doesn't make them wrong." "Even if those choices involve abandoning your duty to your family?" "My duty is to myself, to live honestly, to refuse to be property." She met the doctor's eyes. "If that makes me insane, then every woman who's ever wanted control of her own life is insane." The doctors conferred in low voices. Evelyn's father stood rigid, his face unreadable. Rowan waited near the door, calm but alert. Finally, the lead doctor turned to Evelyn's father. "Mr. Hartwell, I'm afraid we cannot support your petition." "What?" "Your daughter shows no signs of hysteria, nervous collapse, or mental deficiency. She appears to be a rational adult making informed decisions. We cannot in good conscience declare her unfit." Her father's face went red. "That's absurd. She fled her wedding, married a stranger, destroyed her family's reputation, none of which constitutes legal insanity. Unconventional behavior is not the same as mental illness." The doctor began gathering his papers. "I'm sorry, but our examination is complete. I'll find other doctors, real doctors who understand. You can seek other opinions, but I suspect you'll find the same result. Your daughter is sane, Mr. Hartwell. She simply disagrees with you." After they left, Evelyn's father turned on her. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." Evelyn stood, surprised by how steady her voice was. "You've lost, Father. I'm married. I'm legally sane, and I'm never coming back." "You think you've won? You've ruined yourself. No one in society will receive you." "Good. I don't want to be received by people who think women are currency." Her father looked at Rowan. "This is your doing. You've poisoned her against her own family." "No," Evelyn said before Rowan could respond. "You did that yourself, the moment you tried to sell me to a man who didn't love me." Her father stared at her, and for a moment, just a moment, she saw something that might have been regret in his eyes, but then it hardened back into anger. "Get out of my sight." Evelyn left without looking back. Rowan followed, and they walked out of the house together into the London afternoon. "You did it," Rowan said quietly. "I did." Evelyn felt tears coming, but they were different than before. Not fear or sadness, but something like relief. Can we go home now? Yes. Let's go home. They returned to Cornwall 2 days later. As the house on the cliff came into view, Evelyn felt something settle in her chest. This was home now. Not the London townhouse she'd grown up in. This strange, honest place at the edge of the sea. Mrs. Gill greeted them with relief. Thank heaven you're back. I was worried. We're fine. Better than fine. Evelyn hugged the old woman, surprising them both. The doctors declared me sane. Father's petition was denied. Of course you're sane. Anyone with eyes could see that. Mrs. Gill bustled toward the kitchen. I've made your favorite stew, Mr. Rowan, and there's fresh bread. That night, Evelyn and Rowan ate dinner in comfortable silence. The fear that had gripped her for weeks was finally loosening. She was safe. She was free. She was home. What happens now? She asked. Now? Now we figure out how to actually live together. Build something that works for both of us. Rowan poured wine. Unless you want to go back to London, try to reconcile. No, never. Evelyn was certain of that much. I want to stay here, learn to manage the household properly, maybe read some of those books in your library. Mathematics books, if you have them. Rowan smiled. I have them, and I'd be happy to teach you if you want. They talked late into the night, making plans. Real plans, not the kind imposed by society or family obligation. Plans they chose together. But as Evelyn finally climbed the stairs to her room, exhausted and cautiously happy, she found an envelope slipped under her door. No return address. Just her name in handwriting she didn't recognize. She opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a newspaper clipping. The clipping was from The Times. Announcement of Alexander Ashford's engagement to Lady Margaret Somerset, daughter of an earl, wealthy in her own right. Fast work. Clearly he'd wasted no time finding another fortune to marry. But it was the handwritten note that made Evelyn's blood run cold. You thought you escaped. You thought you won. But there are consequences for embarrassing powerful men. Enjoy your victory while it lasts. Evelyn stared at the note until the words blurred. Her hands had gone numb, the paper trembling between her fingers. Alexander's initials sat at the bottom like a threat carved in ink. She should wake Rowan, show him the letter, but her feet wouldn't move, her voice wouldn't work. The walls of her room suddenly felt too close, the air too thick. A knock shattered the silence. Rowan's voice, concerned. Evelyn? I saw your light still on. She managed to unlock the door. He took one look at her face and stepped inside. What happened? Wordlessly, she handed him the letter and clipping, watched his jaw tighten as he read, his gray eyes going hard and cold. When did this arrive? Just now, it was under my door. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. He's threatening me, isn't he? That's what this is. It's meant to frighten you, make you feel unsafe. Rowan crumpled the letter in his fist. It won't work. Won't it? He's a duke, Rowan. He has power, connections, money, and you have something he doesn't. You have the truth. Rowan moved to the window, checked the latch, the curtains. He's angry because you made him look foolish. Men like Alexander can't stand that, but anger makes people sloppy. Or dangerous. That too. He turned back to her. Do you want to leave Cornwall? Go somewhere he can't find you? The question caught Evelyn off guard. You'd do that? Uproot everything because of a threatening letter? I do whatever keeps you safe. The simple honesty of it made something in Evelyn's chest tighten. But running felt wrong. She'd already run once, from London, from her father, from the life she was supposed to lead. Running again would mean Alexander had won. No, I'm not leaving. She took the crumpled letter from Rowan's hand, smoothed it out on her desk. If he wants consequences, I'll give him consequences. Just not the ones he's expecting. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that Alexander threatened the wrong woman. Evelyn pulled out paper and pen, her mind racing. He believes I'm isolated here, cut off from society, powerless. But what if I'm not? Evelyn, my mother wrote to me. Against my father's orders. That means others might listen too. She began writing quickly. Clara knows the truth about Alexander. She could testify to his character, his schemes, and there must be others, other women he used, other families he manipulated for their money. Rowan pulled up a chair, watching her write. You want to destroy his reputation. I want to tell the truth. If that destroys him, it's his own doing. Evelyn's pen flew across the paper. London thrives on scandal. Alexander thinks marrying quickly will make everyone forget. But what if they remember? What if they start asking questions? Your cousin might not help you. She has her own reputation to protect. Then I'll find someone who will. Evelyn sealed the letter to Clara, started another. Alexander isn't the only person who knows powerful people. My father has enemies, business rivals who'd love to see him embarrassed. And Alexander's debts. Those creditors must be wondering how he went from bankruptcy to an earl's daughter so quickly. She wrote 3 more letters before the candle burned low. One to her mother, carefully worded. One to a society columnist her mother had always despised, the kind of woman who printed gossip with gleeful accuracy. And one to the solicitor who'd handled her grandmother's estate, asking about women's legal rights in cases of threats and intimidation. You're going to war, Rowan observed. He started it. I'm just finishing it. Evelyn blotted the last letter, looked up at him. Is that wrong? Should I just ignore the threat and hope he loses interest? No. Men like Alexander don't lose interest. They escalate. Rowan stood, gathered the letters. I'll have Thomas post these first thing tomorrow, and I'll write some letters of my own. I know people in London still. Not many, but enough. We'll make sure Alexander understands that threatening you has consequences. After he left, Evelyn tried to sleep, but couldn't. She kept seeing Alexander's face, hearing his voice. You're being ridiculous. You'll have nothing. But she wasn't nothing, not anymore. The next morning, Thomas rode to town with the letters. Evelyn threw herself into household work, needing the distraction. Mrs. Gill put her to work in the kitchen, teaching her to make bread from scratch. You've got to work the dough harder than that, Mrs. Hale. The old woman demonstrated, her weathered hands kneading with practiced efficiency. Put your back into it. Bread won't rise if you're gentle with it. Evelyn pushed harder, felt the dough resist, then yield. There was something satisfying about it, this concrete physical work where effort produced visible results. Did you ever marry Mrs. Gill? Once. Long time ago. The housekeeper's hands never stopped moving. He was a fisherman. Good man, terrible temper, drowned in a storm when I was 25. I'm sorry. Don't be. We had 5 good years before the sea took him. That's more than some people get. Mrs. Gill shaped her dough into a neat round. You and Mr. Rowan, though, that's different, isn't it? Evelyn's hands stilled. Different how? You don't look at each other like married folks usually do, more like business partners. There was no judgment in her voice, just observation. Not that it's my place to say. We married for practical reasons. Protection, mostly. Practical, Mrs. Gill smiled slightly. Well, I suppose there's worse foundations for a marriage. At least you're honest about it. They worked in companionable silence for a while. Evelyn's arms ached, her hands were covered in flour, and she'd never felt more present in her own body. Mrs. Gill, can I ask you something? Of course you can. Do you think I'm making a mistake? Staying here instead of trying to reconcile with my family? The old woman considered the question while shaping another loaf. I think family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who see you clear and stand by you anyway. You got that here, seems to me. But what if Alexander? What if he what? Sends threatening letters? Let him. Words on paper can't hurt you if you don't let them. She dusted off her hands. You're stronger than you think, Mrs. Hale. You walked 5 miles in the dark to get here, stood up to your father, faced down those doctors. You really think some angry duke is going to break you now? Put like that, it did seem absurd. Evelyn felt something settle in her chest. Not confidence exactly, but determination. A week passed. Then 2. No response came from any of the letters, and Evelyn began to wonder if she'd miscalculated. Maybe no one cared about Alexander's schemes. Maybe London had already moved on to newer scandals. Then Clara's reply arrived. Dearest Evelyn, I received your letter, and I must tell you, I've been waiting for someone to ask. Yes, I'll testify to everything. Alexander's manipulation, his debts, his schemes. But I'm not the only one. Do Do you remember Lady Sarah Pemberton? She was engaged to Alexander 3 years ago, before he broke it off suddenly. I found her. She says Alexander courted her intensely, promised marriage, then dropped her the moment he learned her father lost his fortune in a bad investment. There are others too, a pattern of behavior spanning years. I'm compiling everything, names, dates, circumstances. When I'm finished, half of London will know exactly what kind of man Alexander Ashford really is. Your cousin, Clara Evelyn, read the letter twice, then carried it to Rowan's study. He was bent over account books, a frown creasing his forehead. We might have a problem with the south pasture fence. He stopped when he saw her expression. What is it? She handed him Clara's letter, watched his eyebrows rise as he read. Your cousin is more formidable than I gave her credit for. She's building a case against him, publicly. Evelyn felt a fierce sort of pride. Clara's risking her own reputation to do this. Because she knows it's right, and because Alexander underestimated both of you. Rowan set down the letter. This changes things. If Clara can prove a pattern of predatory behavior, Alexander's new engagement might fall apart. The Earl won't want his daughter married to a fortune hunter. Do you think it'll work? I think Alexander made enemies every time he discarded a woman for her money. Those enemies are about to become very vocal. He stood, moved to the window overlooking the cliffs. But Evelyn, you need to prepare yourself. This will get ugly. Alexander won't accept exposure quietly. Good. I'm tired of quiet. She joined him at the window. My whole life I was taught to be quiet, to smile and nod and never make waves. Look where that got me. Nearly married to a man who saw you as a bank account. Exactly. So if making waves means Alexander faces consequences for once, then I'll make waves. 2 days later, the Society columnist replied. Her letter was brief and sharp. Mrs. Hale, your information is fascinating. I'd like to hear more. Would you be willing to meet in London? I can offer you protection and discretion. And in return, I can offer Alexander Ashford something he's long deserved, the truth in print. Regards, Mrs. Beatrice Walsh. The London Chronicle. She wants to meet. Evelyn showed the letter to Rowan over breakfast. In London. It could be a trap. Your father, Alexander, they could be using her. Or it could be exactly what it looks like. A chance to tell my story to someone who'll actually print it. Evelyn set down her tea. I'm going. Then I'm going with you. Rowan, not negotiable. If we're doing this, we're doing it together. His tone left no room for argument. Besides, I have business in London anyway. The railway investment your father keeps writing angry letters about. They left for London 3 days later. This time, Evelyn felt different walking through the city's streets. Less like a runaway, more like a woman with a purpose. Mrs. Walsh's office was in a narrow building near Fleet Street, the air thick with ink and paper and ambition. The columnist herself was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, dressed practically and regarding Evelyn with undisguised curiosity. Mrs. Hale, thank you for coming. She gestured to chairs. Tea? Please. They sat. Mrs. Walsh poured with efficient grace, then pulled out a notebook. I've been writing about London society for 20 years. In that time, I've watched men like Alexander Ashford manipulate their way through dozens of women, always landing on their feet. It's time someone said something. You believe me, then? About his schemes? Believe you? My dear, I've been collecting stories about him for years. I just never had anyone willing to go on record. Mrs. Walsh flipped through her notes. Your cousin Clara contacted me last week, gave me names, dates, details. Combined with your testimony and what I've gathered independently, we have enough for a rather explosive story. Evelyn's heart raced. What kind of story? The kind that ruins reputations, makes people ask questions, forces the Earl of Somerset to reconsider his daughter's engagement. Mrs. Walsh leaned forward. But I need you to be certain. Once this prints, there's no taking it back. Alexander will come after you with everything he has. He's already threatened me. Sent me a letter saying there would be consequences. Do you still have it? Evelyn pulled the crumpled note from her bag. Mrs. Walsh read it, her expression darkening. May I keep this? It's evidence of intimidation. Keep it. I don't want it. Good. The columnist made notes. Now, I need you to tell me everything, from the beginning. Don't leave anything out. For the next 2 hours, Evelyn talked about overhearing Alexander and Clara, about the wedding she'd fled, about her father's attempts to have her declared insane, about the marriage to Rowan and the threats that followed. Mrs. Walsh wrote it all down, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Rowan sat quietly beside Evelyn, his presence steady and reassuring. When Evelyn finished, Mrs. Walsh set down her pen. This is even better than I hoped. With your permission, I'd like to run this as a 3-part series. Part 1 exposing Alexander's pattern of behavior. Part 2 about your escape and what it says about how society treats women. Part 3 about the legal system's attempts to silence you. You'd do that? Put it all in print? My dear, I've been waiting my whole career for a story like this. Women's voices matter. It's time London remembered that. She stood, offered her hand. Thank you for trusting me. They shook. Evelyn felt something like hope unfurling in her chest. When will it print? Next week. I'll send you advance copies. Mrs. Walsh smiled. I suggest you stay in Cornwall when it does. London is about to become very loud. They left the office and walked through the city. Evelyn felt lighter than she had in weeks. You did it, Rowan said quietly. We did it. None of this would have happened without you. I didn't do anything except give you a place to land. You gave me a choice. That's everything. They stopped for dinner at a small restaurant tucked away from the main streets. The food was simple but good, the wine better. Evelyn found herself actually enjoying London for the first time. Not the society events and rigid rules, but the city itself, the energy, the possibilities. What will you do? Rowan asked. After the story prints and Alexander's reputation is destroyed, have you thought about what comes next? I don't know. Learn to manage your estate properly. Maybe read those mathematics books. Figure out who I am when I'm not being who everyone expects me to be. That sounds like a good plan. What about you? What do you want? Rowan considered the question. Honestly, I want what I have now. Quiet, freedom, someone intelligent to talk to over dinner. He met her eyes. You've made life at Clifftop House considerably less boring. Is that a compliment? From me? Yes. Evelyn laughed. It felt good, this easy companionship. They weren't in love. She was clear-eyed enough to recognize that. But they were becoming friends, partners in the truest sense. They returned to Cornwall 2 days later. The house welcomed them back with familiar sounds. Mrs. Gill singing in the kitchen, Thomas hammering something in the barn, the eternal crash of waves against the cliffs. I'm glad to be home, Evelyn said, surprised to mean it. So am I. The article printed the following Tuesday. Mrs. Walsh sent advance copies as promised, and Evelyn read her own story in black and white, her words transformed into something powerful and permanent. The headline was stark. The Duke Who Collected Heiresses, a Pattern of Deception Exposed. Mrs. Walsh had been thorough. She'd included testimonies from 5 different women Alexander had courted and abandoned. Claire's account of the affair, Evelyn's story of overhearing the truth and fleeing, even statements from creditors about Alexander's debts and the timing of his various engagements. It was damning, irrefutable. And by Thursday, all of London was talking about it. Letters began arriving. Some angry, accusing Evelyn of being vindictive. But more were supportive. Women thanking her for speaking out, men expressing disgust at Alexander's behavior. Even Evelyn's mother wrote, her words careful but warm. Dearest Evelyn, I read the article 3 times. Your father is furious, but I find myself proud. You were braver than I ever was. I stayed in a marriage that made me unhappy because it was expected. You chose differently. I don't know if we can repair our relationship, but I wanted you to know. I understand now why you ran, and I don't blame you. Your loving mother Evelyn cried reading it, showed it to Rowan over dinner that night. Your mother sounds like a woman waking up, he observed. Maybe we all are. Waking up. The real explosion came on Saturday. A letter arrived from Clara, breathless with news. Evelyn, the Earl of Somerset has broken off Margaret's engagement to Alexander, publicly. He issued a statement saying he cannot in good conscience allow his daughter to marry a man of such questionable character. Alexander is ruined. His creditors are calling in debts, his friends are distancing themselves, and he's reportedly fled to France. Your father is beside himself. Mother says he's locked himself in his study for 2 days, and I feel free for the first time in months. Thank you for being brave enough to start this. Your cousin, Clara Evelyn, read the letter aloud to Rowan. When she finished, they sat in silence. He's gone, she finally said. Alexander is actually gone. And you're here, safe, vindicated. I didn't do this for vindication. No, you did it because it was right. The vindication is just a bonus. Rowan poured wine, raised his glass. To telling the truth, and to consequences. They drank. Evelyn felt something profound settling in her bones. Not happiness exactly, but satisfaction. She'd stood up to the men who'd tried to control her. She'd fought back. And she'd won. Not perfectly. Not without cost. Her relationship with her father was probably destroyed forever. Her place in London society was permanently gone, but she'd won the things that mattered, her freedom, her voice, her right to choose her own path. The next few weeks passed quietly. Evelyn continued learning to manage the household, surprised by how much she enjoyed the work. The account books made sense to her in a way watercolors never had. She reorganized the kitchen storage, implemented a better system for tracking supplies, even helped Thomas repair the south pasture fence. Her hands grew calloused, her skin tanned from working in the garden. She was nothing like the pale, decorative society girl who'd arrived in Cornwall weeks ago. She was better. One evening, she found Rowan in his study, frowning at a letter. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Something's unexpected. He handed her the letter. Read this. It was from a women's reform organization in London. They wanted to know if Evelyn would speak at their next meeting about her experience challenging the legal system's treatment of women. They want me to speak in public? Apparently your story inspired a lot of women. They want to hear more. Evelyn read the letter again, her mind racing. Public speaking had never been part of her education. Ladies didn't give speeches. They stayed quiet and decorative. But she wasn't that woman anymore. I want to do it. Rowan smiled. I thought you might. They traveled to London 6 weeks after the wedding. The reform meeting was in a modest hall, packed with women of all ages and classes. Evelyn stood at the front, her prepared notes trembling in her hands, and looked out at dozens of expectant faces. For a moment, fear threatened to swallow her. Then she remembered Alexander's sneer, her father's dismissal. Every man who'd ever told her to be quiet, be grateful, be small. She set down her notes and spoke from her heart. 6 weeks ago, I was supposed to marry a duke. I was supposed to smile and be grateful and never question why my fiancé saw me as nothing more than a fortune to be claimed. Instead, I ran. I chose myself. And every day since, someone has tried to punish me for that choice. The room was silent. Evelyn kept talking. My father tried to have me declared insane because I refused to be property. The legal system tried to strip away my rights because I dared to make my own decisions. Society tried to shame me back into compliance, and they all failed because I had something they didn't expect. I had support. People who believed me, who stood with me. She looked at the women watching her. Some were crying, some nodding, all listening. I'm not special. I'm not uniquely brave. I just got tired of being told my life belonged to everyone except me. And if my story helps even one woman find the courage to stand up for herself, then every consequence was worth it. The applause started small, then grew until the whole room was standing, clapping, some women openly weeping. Evelyn stood there, overwhelmed, watching these women. Her sisters in spirit, if not blood, claim her story as their own. Afterward, dozens wanted to talk to her, share their own stories of controlling fathers, manipulative suitors, legal systems designed to keep them powerless. Evelyn listened to them all, offered what advice she could, felt something profound shifting inside her. She'd thought running away was the end of her story, but maybe it was just the beginning. On the journey back to Cornwall, Rowan was quiet. Finally, he spoke. You were magnificent tonight. I was terrified. That's what made it magnificent. You were scared and you did it anyway. Evelyn watched the countryside roll past. I think I want to do more of this. Not just speaking, but actually helping women who are trapped the way I was. Is that naive? It's ambitious. There's a difference. Rowan shifted to face her. What if we turned part of Clifftop House into a refuge for women fleeing bad situations? We have the space, the resources, and you have the experience to help them. The idea took Evelyn's breath away. You'd do that? We'd do that. Together, if you want. She did want it with a fierce certainty that surprised her. Yes, let's do it. They spent the rest of the journey planning how many women they could house, what resources they'd need, who might help fund it. By the time they reached Clifftop House, they had the bones of a real plan. Mrs. Jill loved the idea immediately. I always thought this house was too big for just one man. Might as well fill it with people who need it. Thomas was more practical. We'll need to add some rooms, make repairs, but it's doable. They started small. One room prepared for guests. Word spread quietly through reform circles. There was a place in Cornwall for women who needed to escape. A safe harbor. The first woman arrived 3 weeks later. Sarah, 19 years old, fleeing an arranged marriage to a man twice her age. She was terrified, traumatized, barely able to speak. Evelyn gave her the blue room, the same room she'd stayed in that first night. Sat with her while she cried. Listened to her story without judgment. You're safe here, Evelyn promised. No one will force you to do anything. You can stay as long as you need. Sarah stayed 2 months, long enough to heal, to plan, to decide what she wanted for herself. When she left, it was to take a position as a teacher in a school that didn't ask about her family or her past. More women followed, some stayed weeks, some months. Each one arrived broken and left stronger. And Evelyn found her purpose in helping them, using her own experience to guide others toward freedom. 6 months after fleeing London, Evelyn stood on the cliffs and watched the sun set over the ocean. The house behind her was full of life. 3 women currently in residence, Mrs. Gill teaching them to cook, Thomas helping one repair a damaged trunk. Rowan found her there, as he often did. They'd fallen into comfortable patterns, separate rooms but shared dinners, independent lives but common purpose. Penny for your thoughts, he said. I was thinking about what my life was supposed to be. Duchess of Ashford, hostess at grand parties, decorative and silent and slowly dying inside. And instead? Instead, I'm here, helping women escape the same fate, speaking at reform meetings, learning mathematics from dusty books in your library, living a life I actually chose. She turned to him. Thank you for making this possible. You made it possible. I just opened a door. No. You stood beside me when everyone else wanted me to fail. You believed me when my own father didn't. You gave me space to figure out who I am. She paused. We're not a traditional marriage. No, we're not. But we're a good partnership. The best kind, I think. Rowan smiled. Built on honesty instead of obligation. They stood together as darkness fell, watching stars emerge. Somewhere in London, Alexander was still in exile, his reputation destroyed. Her father was still angry, still certain she'd ruined herself. Her mother was finding her own small rebellions, writing letters despite her husband's disapproval. And here, on this clifftop in Cornwall, Evelyn had built something new. Not the life she'd been raised to want, but the life she'd chosen for herself. Messy, imperfect, honest, and completely hers. A carriage appeared on the coastal road, heading toward the house. Another woman seeking refuge, probably. Another life about to change. Evelyn turned from the cliffs and headed back to greet her, Rowan falling into step beside her, ready to help, ready to listen, ready to offer the same gift someone had once offered her, a choice, and the freedom to make it. The woman who stepped out of the carriage wasn't seeking refuge. She was Evelyn's mother. Evelyn stopped dead in the courtyard, her breath catching. Margaret Hartwell looked smaller than she remembered, thinner, older, her expensive traveling clothes hanging loose on her frame, but her eyes were clear in a way they hadn't been in years. Mother? Evelyn. Her mother's voice cracked. May I come in? I know I have no right to ask, but... Of course, come inside. Evelyn recovered herself, gestured toward the house. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Rowan, this is my mother. Mother, this is my husband. Rowan bowed slightly. Mrs. Hartwell, you're welcome here. They settled in the sitting room, an awkward silence filling the space. Mrs. Gill brought tea, her curious glances discreet but obvious. Finally, Margaret spoke. Your father doesn't know I'm here. He'd be furious if he found out. Then why come? Because I've spent 6 months watching you build a life without us, reading about you in the papers, hearing stories from women you've helped. Margaret's hands shook as she set down her teacup. And I realized I've been living like a ghost for 20 years, taking laudanum to sleep, sherry to face the day, pretending everything was fine when nothing was fine. Evelyn's throat tightened. Mother, let me finish, please. Margaret took a shaky breath. When you ran, I was horrified, embarrassed. I thought you'd ruined everything, but then I read that article, heard what Alexander had done, what your father tried to do, and I realized you were the only one in our family brave enough to tell the truth. I wasn't brave. I was desperate. You were both, and you were right. Tears spilled down Margaret's cheeks. I should have protected you, should have questioned why a duke would suddenly want to marry a railway heiress, should have noticed that my own daughter was miserable, but I was too busy trying to maintain appearances. Rowan stood quietly. I'll give you some privacy. No, stay. Margaret surprised them both. You're her husband. This concerns you too. She turned back to Evelyn. I came to apologize, and to ask if there's any chance you'd let me be part of your life again. Not as I was, not trying to control or fix you, just as your mother. The words Evelyn had been holding back for months came tumbling out. Do you have any idea what it was like? Knowing father only saw me as a business opportunity, that you cared more about what your friends thought than what I wanted? I do now, and I'm ashamed. Margaret's voice was raw. I let your father make all the decisions. Let him tell me what to think, how to feel, who to be. I became so small I barely existed. And I was teaching you to do the same thing. You were. Evelyn wasn't going to soften the truth. You taught me that my job was to be decorative, that my thoughts didn't matter, that marriage was a transaction, not a partnership. I know, and I was wrong. Margaret stood, moved to the window overlooking the sea. After you left, something broke in me. Or maybe something finally woke up. I stopped taking the laudanum, started reading the books your father forbade, joined a women's reading group that discusses radical ideas like suffrage and property rights. Despite herself, Evelyn felt a flicker of hope. Father must hate that. He's furious, but for the first time in our marriage, I don't care. Margaret turned back to face her. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just asking for a chance to know the woman you've become, the woman you built yourself into without my help. Evelyn looked at Rowan. He gave a slight nod. The decision was hers. You can stay, Evelyn said slowly. For a few days. We can talk. But Mother, I'm not the daughter you remember. I'm not going back to London. I'm not reconciling with Father. This is my life now. I know, and I'm not asking you to change it. Margaret's smile was sad, but genuine. I'm asking if there's room in this new life for a very imperfect mother who's trying to be better. There might be, we'll see. Over the next 3 days, Margaret stayed at Clifftop House. She met the women currently in residence. Sarah had returned for a visit, and 2 new arrivals were settling in. She helped in the kitchen, listened to Evelyn speak at a local meeting about women's rights, watched the household function with quiet efficiency. On the 3rd evening, she found Evelyn in the library, bent over mathematical texts. You're actually studying this? Margaret picked up a book on calculus, looking baffled. Rowan's teaching me. I'm not very good yet, but I'm learning. Your governess said mathematics would make you unmarriageable. Well, I'm already married, so I might as well learn something useful. Evelyn set down her pen. Why are you really here, Mother? And don't say just to apologize. You could have done that in a letter. Margaret sat down heavily. Your father is in financial trouble. The railway investment isn't performing as expected. Several business partners have withdrawn support after the scandal with Alexander. He's losing money faster than he can make it. And he sent you to ask me for help? Evelyn's voice went cold. No, he doesn't know I'm here, remember? Margaret twisted her hands together. But I thought you should know, in case he tries something desperate. Like what? I don't know. Legal action, another petition. He's not thinking clearly. She met Evelyn's eyes. He blames you for everything. Says if you just married Alexander, none of this would have happened. He's right about one thing. If I'd married Alexander, none of this would have happened. I'd be trapped in a loveless marriage. Alexander would have his fortune, and father's reputation would be intact. Evelyn stood, paced to the window. But I'd be miserable, probably taking laudanum just like you were. I know. That's why I'm warning you. Your father is proud and stubborn, and he doesn't lose gracefully. What can he do to me now? I'm married, legally sane, living my own life. He can make things difficult, spread rumors, use his connections to undermine your refuge work. He has power still, even if it's fading. Evelyn absorbed this. Then, let him try. I'm not the powerless girl I was 6 months ago. Margaret smiled, something fierce and proud in it. No, you're certainly not. The next morning, Margaret prepared to leave. The carriage was ready, her bags packed. She embraced Evelyn at the door. Thank you for letting me visit, for not turning me away. Come back, Evelyn said impulsively. Not to stay, but to visit, when you need to escape London. I will. And Evelyn, I'm proud of you. I should have said that months ago, but I'm saying it now. I'm proud of the woman you've become. After her mother left, Evelyn felt strangely settled. Not forgiven, the hurt ran too deep for that, but maybe moving toward forgiveness, which was something. The warning about her father proved prescient. 2 weeks later, legal papers arrived. Her father was suing Rowan for alienation of affection, claiming Rowan had deliberately stolen Evelyn away from her family and her proper marriage. This is absurd, Evelyn said, reading the documents. I came to you. You didn't seduce me or trick me. Absurd doesn't matter in court, only what we can prove. Rowan was already writing to his solicitor. He's trying to attack me financially. If he wins, I'd owe him damages. Enough to hurt, maybe force us to close the refuge. Can he win? Depends on the judge, on how convincing our testimony is, on whether London's tired of your father's vendetta or still sympathetic to him. Rowan set down his pen. We need witnesses. People who can testify that you came here freely, that our marriage is legitimate, that you're thriving. They built their case methodically. Clara agreed to testify. Mrs. Walsh, the journalist. Several women from the refuge who could speak to Evelyn's character and work, even Reverend Michaels, who'd performed the marriage ceremony. The trial was set for late autumn. They returned to London one more time, staying at Rowan's townhouse while lawyers prepared their defense. The courtroom was smaller than Evelyn expected, but packed with spectators. Her father sat across from them, looking gaunt and angry. His solicitor was an expensive London barrister, polished and confident. The proceedings began. Her father's barrister painted a picture of Evelyn as a confused young woman, manipulated by a calculating recluse who'd preyed on her vulnerability. Mr. Hale saw an opportunity, the barrister argued. A wealthy young woman, distraught over a broken engagement. He offered shelter, then trapped her in marriage before she could think clearly. That's not what happened, Evelyn whispered. Let them talk, Rowan murmured. Our turn comes next. When their barrister stood, he called Clara first. She testified clearly about Alexander's manipulation, about Evelyn's genuine distress, about how the marriage to Rowan had been Evelyn's decision. Did Mr. Hale pressure her in any way? Their barrister asked. No, if anything, he gave her space to choose. He offered marriage as an option, but made it clear she could refuse. Clara looked directly at the judge. Evelyn Hartwell, Evelyn Hale, is the strongest woman I know. No one could force her into anything she didn't want. Mrs. Walsh testified next, speaking to the articles she'd written, the women she'd interviewed, the pattern of Evelyn helping others rather than being helped. Mrs. Hale isn't a victim, she said firmly. She's a reformer. She's built something important in Cornwall. That's not the behavior of someone under undue influence. Then Rowan took the stand. He spoke calmly about that first night when Evelyn appeared at his door, about the practical arrangement they'd made, about the partnership they'd built. I married Evelyn Hartwell because she needed legal protection, and I could provide it, he said. But I stayed married to her because she's brilliant and determined and makes my life better. That's not manipulation, that's mutual respect. Finally, Evelyn herself testified. She'd been dreading this moment, but when she stood, looked out at the courtroom, she felt surprisingly calm. Her father's barrister was aggressive. Mrs. Hale, isn't it true that you were distraught when you arrived at Mr. Hale's residence? I was upset, not distraught. And isn't it true that Mr. Hale took advantage of that emotional state to propose marriage? No. He offered marriage as a practical solution to a practical problem. I accepted because it made sense. You expect us to believe you married a virtual stranger out of practicality. I married a man who respected me more in one conversation than my fiancé had in months of courtship. Yes, that was practical. Evelyn met the barrister's eyes. And it was the smartest decision I've ever made. Your father claims Mr. Hale isolated you from your family. My father tried to have me declared insane because I refused to be sold to a duke. I isolated myself from him because he was dangerous to my well-being. The barrister's expression hardened. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. The medical examination proved I was sane. The marriage certificate proves I acted freely. The refuge I've built proves I'm capable and independent. My father's lawsuit is a last desperate attempt to punish me for disobeying him. The courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge banged his gavel for silence. When the testimonies concluded, both barristers made their closing arguments. Then the judge retired to deliberate. Evelyn and Rowan waited in a small anteroom. The minutes crawled by. Whatever happens, Rowan said, we'll manage. What if he rules for my father? What if we lose everything? Then we rebuild. We've done it before. But Evelyn couldn't shake the fear. This was it, the final confrontation. Win here, and her father's power over her ended completely. Lose, and everything she'd built could collapse. An hour passed, then 2. Finally, they were called back into the courtroom. The judge looked tired. He shuffled papers, cleared his throat. I've reviewed the testimonies and evidence. This case hinges on one question. Did Mr. Hale unduly influence Mrs. Hale into marriage, or did she act of her own free will? Evelyn's heart pounded so hard she could barely breathe. The evidence clearly shows that Mrs. Hale is an intelligent, capable woman who made a difficult decision under trying circumstances. Multiple witnesses attest to her soundness of mind. Her subsequent actions, building a refuge, speaking publicly, managing a household, demonstrate continued capability and independence. Hope flickered in Evelyn's chest. Furthermore, Mr. Hartwell's own actions, attempting to have his daughter declared mentally unfit, forcing her into an engagement with a man of questionable character, undermine his claim to be acting in her best interests. Her father's face went red. Therefore, I find in favor of the defendants. Mr. Hale did not alienate Mrs. Hale's affections. She exercised her legal right to choose her own husband. The marriage stands. Mr. Hartwell's suit is dismissed. The gavel came down. It was over. Evelyn's father stood abruptly, his chair scraping loud in the sudden silence. He looked at Evelyn, his expression a mixture of rage and something that might have been grief. This isn't over, he said quietly. Yes, father. It is. Evelyn's voice was steady. You don't control me anymore. You never will again. He left without another word, his solicitor scrambling to follow. Outside the courtroom, Clara hugged Evelyn fiercely. You did it. Actually did it. We did it. All of us. Evelyn looked around at the women who'd testified, who'd supported her. Thank you. All of you. Mrs. Walsh was making notes furiously. This will make an excellent follow-up article. The final chapter of the Evelyn Hartwell story. Evelyn Hale, Evelyn corrected gently. That's who I am now. They celebrated that night, a small dinner at Rowan's townhouse with Clara, Mrs. Walsh, and a few others who'd helped. The wine flowed freely, the conversation was loud and happy, and for the first time since fleeing London, Evelyn felt completely, utterly free. Late that night, after everyone had gone home, Evelyn found Rowan on the terrace overlooking the small garden. Can't sleep? He asked. Too much excitement. She joined him at the railing. I keep thinking about what the judge said, That I have the legal right to choose my own husband. You do. Which means I could choose to end this marriage if I wanted. Evelyn wasn't sure why she was saying this. We made a practical arrangement. We could unmake it just as practically. Rowan turned to face her. Is that what you want? No. The certainty of it surprised her. I just wanted you to know that I'm staying because I choose to, not because I'm trapped or obligated. I choose this partnership. I choose you. Something shifted in Rowan's expression. Relief, maybe, or happiness. I choose you too, for whatever that's worth. It's worth everything. They stood together in the darkness, and Evelyn realized something had changed between them. When had the practical arrangement become something more? When had partnership become friendship, and friendship become what? Not love, maybe. Not yet. But something heading in that direction. We should go back to Cornwall, Rowan said. I'm tired of London. Me too. Let's go home. They left the next morning, leaving behind the courtroom and the scandal and the last vestiges of Evelyn's old life. The journey felt lighter this time, full of possibility instead of fear. Cornwall welcomed them back with gray skies and wild winds. The house stood solid on its cliff, lights glowing in the windows. Mrs. Gill had prepared their favorite meal. Thomas had repaired the fence that had been bothering them for weeks. Everything was exactly as they'd left it, and exactly where they wanted to be. Over the next year, the refuge grew. They added more rooms, hired additional staff, developed connections with reform organizations across England. Women arrived regularly, some fleeing abusive situations, some escaping unwanted marriages, some just needing a place to breathe and figure out what they wanted from life. Evelyn threw herself into the work. She learned to be a competent administrator, managing budgets and staff, and the endless logistics of running a household that served a constantly shifting population. She continued speaking at reform meetings, her voice growing stronger each time. She studied mathematics with Rowan in the evenings, their discussions ranging from calculus to philosophy to the future they were building together. And slowly, imperceptibly, the partnership they'd forged evolved into something neither of them had expected. It started small. Rowan's hand finding hers during a difficult conversation with a traumatized woman. Evelyn seeking him out first when she had news to share. The way they'd begun finishing each other's sentences, anticipating each other's needs, moving through the house like two parts of a whole. One night, nearly a year after their wedding, Evelyn knocked on the connecting door between their rooms. "Come in," Rowan called. She entered to find him reading by lamplight, his hair disheveled and his spectacles sliding down his nose. He looked comfortable and familiar and dear in a way that made her chest tight. "I've been thinking," she said. Dangerous occupation. "Shut up." But she was smiling. "I've been thinking about us, about this marriage we built on practicality and respect." Rowan set down his book. And I think somewhere along the way, it became something more, at least for me. The admission felt enormous. I love this life we've built. I love the work we do. I love arguing with you about mathematics and planning the refuge and just existing in the same space as you. Evelyn, I'm not asking you to feel the same way. Our arrangement doesn't require love, but I wanted you to know that this isn't just practical for me anymore. It's real. Rowan stood, crossed to her. Do you remember what I said before we married? That I couldn't predict the future? You said ask me in a year. It's been a year, and if you're asking, he took her hands. I love you. Somewhere between the whiskey and the mathematics and watching you transform from a frightened runaway into the strongest person I know. I fell completely in love with you. Evelyn's breath caught. You could have mentioned that sooner. I didn't want to pressure you. We had an agreement. She kissed him, cut off his words with her mouth on his, pouring a year's worth of growing feelings into it. He responded immediately, pulling her closer, deepening the kiss until they were both breathless. When they finally broke apart, Rowan was smiling. So, does this mean we're renegotiating our arrangement? I think we threw out the arrangement months ago and just didn't admit it. Probably true. He kissed her again, softer this time. Stay tonight? I thought you'd never ask. 18 months after fleeing her wedding to Alexander Ashford, Evelyn stood on the cliffs and watched the sunrise. Behind her, the house was stirring to life. Women waking, Mrs. Jill starting breakfast, Thomas checking the grounds, and in their shared bedroom, Rowan still slept, one arm thrown across the space where she'd been. She'd built a life here, not the one she'd been raised to want. No title, no grand London house, no army of servants, but a life that mattered, a life that helped people, a life that was completely, honestly hers. A letter had arrived yesterday from her mother. Margaret visited quarterly now, had even brought a few women to the refuge herself. She'd left Evelyn's father 6 months ago, was living independently for the first time in her life. She was learning, slowly, to be the person she'd never allowed herself to be. Clara had married, a kind merchant who valued her intelligence and didn't care about her past mistakes. She visited occasionally, bringing donations for the refuge and news from London. Alexander was still in France, his reputation destroyed. The Earl's daughter had married someone else. Evelyn's father had lost most of his fortune and influence, was living quietly in the countryside, broken by his own pride. And Evelyn? She'd won everything that mattered. Not through violence or revenge, though she'd been tempted by both. She'd won by telling the truth, by standing up when it would have been easier to sit down, by choosing herself when everyone else wanted to choose for her. The sun cleared the horizon, painting the ocean gold and crimson. Evelyn heard footsteps behind her, knew without looking that it was Rowan. "You're up early," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Couldn't sleep, too busy thinking about the future." "What about it?" "We have 10 women in residence now. Mrs. Walsh wrote asking if we'd consider expanding. Opening a second location, maybe in London." "That's ambitious." "I'm feeling ambitious." She turned in his arms. "What do you think? Could we manage it?" "We can manage anything." He kissed her forehead. "Look what we've already done." They stood together as the day brightened, two people who'd found each other in the midst of chaos and built something solid from the wreckage of their old lives. Not perfect. They still argued, still struggled, still made mistakes. But honest. Always honest. "Do you ever regret it?" Evelyn asked. "Marrying me instead of finding someone more conventional?" "Every single day." She elbowed him. "Liar." "You're right. I don't regret a single moment." He pulled her closer. "You're the best decision I ever made, even when you're being insufferable about mathematics." "I'm not insufferable." "You absolutely are." She laughed, the sound carrying on the wind. Below them, waves crashed against the cliffs, endless and eternal. And behind them, the house full of women finding their own strength, their own voices, their own paths forward. This was her legacy. Not a title or a fortune or a place in society, but lives changed, women freed, a small corner of the world made better by her refusal to accept the cage she'd been offered. "Come on," Rowan said. "Mrs. Gill will have breakfast ready soon, and you know how she gets if we're late." They walked back to the house hand in hand, leaving the cliffs and the sea and the rising sun behind. There was work to do, women to help, plans to make, a refuge to run, a life to live on their own terms. Evelyn Hartwell had died the night she fled London. In her place stood Evelyn Hale, imperfect, stubborn, fierce, and free. A woman who'd chosen herself and, in doing so, had found everything she'd never known she needed. Not the ending she'd been promised, but the one she'd earned. And that made all the difference.